Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. I always thought storms were nature's reset button, clearing away debris, drowning out the past. I was wrong. My name is Wes Turner, and I'm the sole electrician for a string of fire lookouts in northern Minnesota. My job is simple: maintain generators, swap out batteries, and fix wiring so the rangers can keep an eye on lightning strikes and wildfires. I spend 2 weeks at a time perched on stilts in a remote tower, just me, my toolbox, and endless pines. Peaceful, right? It was, until the storm arrived the night of October's hunter's moon. I pulled into the clearing around 5 p.m., skies already heavy with roiling clouds. Ranger Lewis waved me up. "Generators tripped," he said, voice tight. "We lost lights this afternoon." I climbed the ladder, toolbox in hand, and flipped open the control panel. Sure enough, the main breaker was fried, charred wires, a smell like scorched toast. I set to work as thunder grumbled, rain tapping the metal roof. By the time I patched the feed lines and reset the breaker, dusk had swallowed the tower. I flicked the switch. No lights. I cursed, grabbing my headlamp and my phone's backup battery. I climbed down to the generator shed, old diesel unit, temperamental, at the best of times. The engine stalled when I turned the key. I listened to the wind outside, a low keening through the vents. Too quiet for a storm. I pried open the maintenance hatch and found the diesel tank slashed. Deep gashes, 5 inches long, as if clawed. I knelt in the puddles of red-tinged oil and realized those weren't raindrops, but something darker, bleeding from the cuts. A howl rippled across the clearing, deep, animal, like 6 voices echoing in unholy harmony. My hair stood on end. "Lewis," I called into the dark. No answer, only that chorus of long morning howls, heart pounding. I climbed to the observation deck. The rest of the lights were out too, red beacon, radio repeater, cabin lamp. Only the moon shone, big and bronze, through a slice of clearing. I shone my headlamp across the treetops and saw them. 6 figures slinking just beyond the tree line, hunched against the wind. Too tall for wolves, too narrow for bears. Their heads lifted in unison, ears pricked, then eyes. 2 pairs per creature, copper, bright. I swallowed. Sirens, I muttered wolves. But the way they moved, upright, deliberate, I knew the difference. I slammed the hatch shut, raced inside, and locked the door. My headlamp bobbed over every corner. Generator, hatch, tool lockers, even the small window. Nothing moved, but their howls continued, rising and fading. Calling me out, I grabbed the backup chainsaw, last ditch, and yanked on extra layers. The wind tugged at me as I swung open the door. Rain lashed. I screamed into the air. "Stay back." Guns weren't in my toolbox. The nearest town was hours away. All I had was me and a roaring saw. 1 step outside, a bolt of lightning lit. Them, 6 chrome-horned, stag-headed beasts, thick fur spattered with oil and blood, standing on hoofed hind legs. Their front limbs ended in monstrous paws tipped with claws. Where faces should be, wolf-like muzzles stretched wide, teeth bared in grins, too human to ignore. They advanced in a silent line. The chainsaw roared to life. I swung at the nearest beast, metal teeth ripping through fur and flesh. It yipped, like a wounded wolf but deeper, a broken man's cry. The others paused, shifting in the thunderlight. 1 stepped forward, head, cocked eyes, sad. Then they turned, retreating into the storm like ghosts. I stood drenched, shaking, listening to their howls fade. The generator shed door lay twisted open, oil bleeding onto the mud. I staggered back into the tower, locked every hatch, and hunkered down by dawn. Lewis staggered in, eyes glazed. He'd been missing, trapped in the woods. He said he woke too. Find animal tracks circling him, then nothing, just moonlight filtering through the trees. I didn't comfort him. My own mind was reeling. The day crew arrived, and I handed in my resignation. I never mentioned the beasts, the stag-headed pack that had torn through my only refuge. No one believes me when I hint at monsters. They blame faulty wiring, hungry wolves, anything but what I saw. The next hunter's moon. I'll be in Denver, under electric lights that never fail. But every time I hear wind rattle the blinds, I imagine copper eyes at the window, slender shapes in the pines, calling for me to come out. Because once the moon runs red and the power dies, the pack returns, and they remember who dared to stand against them. I never signed up to be prayed. My name's Samir Patel, and I came to Black Pine, Montana, for one thing, the elk rut. As a big game guide, I led wealthy city folk into the high country every September, teaching them patience and respect under the crimson moons. I'd never had a problem, until the rut ended and something else began its hunt. It started the first night after the last client left. I stayed on to help clean gear at a small ranger station outside Moose Creek. After dinner, I stepped out behind the cabin to relieve a full bladder. The moon was a giant pearl in a sky emptied of stars. I heard a branch snap, quick, rhythmic. I whipped my head around. Nothing but the shed's lean-to and the dark pines. I shrugged, returned inside, and locked up. But sleep wouldn't come. Around 2 a.m., the generator died. Lights snapped off in a hollow chime. I fumbled for the flashlight, then heard the breathing, slow, measured, too deep for any human. It came from just beyond the door. I cracked it open. Nothing, just the wind stirring yellow leaves. I figured my nerves were frayed. I went back to bed. At dawn, I found claw marks gouged into the metal siding, 6 inches apart, dragging from the door to the feed bin. No animal I knew could stand on 2 legs and claw like that. On the ground lay a single shed elk antler, cracked, blood-flecked, not from a rut. I loaded my gear into the truck and drove to town for coffee. But my cell died halfway down the road. No bars, just dead. I pulled over, checked the sky. The moon had turned red. Unusually so. I cursed and turned back, determined to repair the generator and my nerves. I found the ranger, Emma, huddled by her desk. She'd been radioing for help. "Something's out there," she said, voice trembling. "I saw it last night. 6 silhouettes on 2 legs, bigger than any man." They circled the cabin and watched me from the tree line. My pulse spiked. "Wolves?" I asked. But the way she said silhouettes told me the answer. "They're hunters," she whispered, "not of elk." That night, we carried ammo and a flare gun into the woods, tracking footprints by flashlight. The air was rank, wet fur, iron, cold, fear. The prints ended at the edge of a mossy clearing where a circle of dozen elk carcasses lay picked cleaned, undisturbed except for one thing. Their rib cages had been carved into crude wolf-like runes. Emma gasped, clutched my arm. I spotted movement at the tree line, tall shapes stepping into the pale flare light. 6 of them, half man, half wolf, faces stretched into snarls of anticipation. Muscles rippled beneath matted fur. Their eyes shone with an intelligence colder than ice. We froze. They advanced. I fired the flare into the sky. The blast of light revealed their true form, towering, hooved legs, twisted antlers atop wolf heads, torsos draped in pelts stitched together from forest creatures. They roared, a sound that mixed man's rage with beast's hunger, and leaped toward us. I hit the radio. Mayday, mayday. Only static answered. Emma pulled me behind a fallen log. We fired rifles into the dark, each bullet ripping fur and flesh. One beast fell, collapsing with a moonlit howl. The others hesitated, then vanished into the trees like shadows. At sunrise, we sprinted back to the station, hearts pounding, rifles empty. The first weak light of dawn broke over Black Pine Ridge, and with it, a silence as final as a tomb closing. Rescue came at daybreak, but no team dared return to that clearing. The bodies and ruins were gone, erased by wind and rain. We couldn't prove what we'd seen. 6 antlered hunters stalking on 2 legs, carving runes of death into elk carcasses. I left Black Pine that weekend. My guideship ended. I sold my gear, traded my rifle for a city life I once fled. But some nights, when the moon glows faint red through my apartment window, I swear I hear distant howls, and I remember that the hunters still walk those pines, waiting for the moon to drench the sky. And when it does, they will return. I thought my past was buried, until the Raven's Roost called me home. I'm Mia Torres. 10 years ago, I left the mountain town of Silver Pine after my brother disappeared on Halloween night. I swore never to return. But when the blood moon was foretold to rise again, I knew something waited for me at Raven's Roost, the old cemetery atop Widow's Hill. Silver Pine was built on ghost stories, miners lost to avalanches, children chasing lanterns, and the howls in the deep forest. My brother, Jonah, was always enthralled by the legends. On his 21st birthday, 16 Halloweens ago, he and his friends climbed Widow's Hill at midnight to summon the wolf choir, a rite ignored by every local adult. He never came back. The town moved on with hushed whispers, and I moved to Seattle. I became a trauma nurse, saving lives in ER chaos, anything to drown the guilt. But when I saw the forecast, lunar eclipse on October 31st, blood moon rising at 11:11 p.m., I knew Jonah wasn't finished calling me. I arrived in Silver Pine on October 30th. The streets were adorned in pumpkins and flickering lanterns, but the faces I passed held tight dread. At the inn, the clerk, old Mrs. Bellamy, slid me a carved wooden talisman, a wolf head circled by a moon. "Keep this close," she whispered. "Raven's Roost opens when the moon bleeds." I thanked her, but laughed it off. I'd been in traumas far worse than legend. That night, I drove up Widow's Hill. The road zigzagged through pines, their trunks like silent sentinels. At the summit lay Raven's Roost, a graveyard of weather-worn headstones, iron fences draped in rust. I parked, talisman cold in my palm, and stepped onto the path of blackened cobbles. The air felt thick, as though the past and present weighed on my lungs. I passed a child's grave, Jonah Torres, 1980, 1999, and my heart twisted. I fought tears. Behind me, the wind moaned through broken lanterns and cracked mausoleums. Midnight approached. I stood beneath a granite angel, wings outstretched, and waited. Then, a flicker of red light as the moon rose behind the pines. Its glow bathed the cemetery in crimson. My skin prickled. The talisman throbbed against my chest. At 11:11 p.m., the blood moon peaked. A hush fell, and then, the howls. First distant, mournful, then closer. They rose from every corner. 6 voices, a chorus of wolf and man. I hunched, breath ragged. From the tree line, 6 shapes emerged, towering, gaunt, their heads a savage marriage of lupin snout, and human jaw. Their eyes burned gold. Coats of matted black fur dripped dew. They moved in a circle around me, paws clicking on cobblestones, claws sheathing in moonlight. I backed into a stone wall, heart pounding. One of the wolfmen stepped forward, and I recognized Jonah's stance, his slow, easy gait. My breath caught. "Jonah," I whispered. He cocked his head, eyes flickering with ancient hunger and pain. He opened his mouth, but not to growl. A strangled echo, half word. "Mia." My tears fell. I shouldn't have come. I raised my voice. "I'm here. I'm sorry." He glanced past me. The other 5 closed in, their howls rising in a shock wave that rattled the gravestones. I turned. Shadows moved behind me, figures stepping from tomb niches, wolves forging flesh into bone, graves cracking open, all eyes fixed on me. I ran, slipped between stones, stumbled across iron headstone railings. They poured after me, 6 wolfmen, 6 spectral wolves, one vast choir of the damned. Their howls tore the night air. I reached the wrought iron gate, locked, rusted, but flung myself against it. The snap echoed like a gunshot. I burst free into the trees and fled down the hill. The path ended at a broken service road, my car's headlights flickered to life as I boarded, slamming the door. I appeared in the rear view. Jonah stood at the cemetery edge, head bowed. Beside him, the wolfmen watched. I raised the carved talisman in my trembling hand. Its rune glowed bright, white. On the stone step of my car, Jonah lifted his head, revealing his human eyes, bright and full of longing. Then, he lowered his face and howled, a heartbreaking sound that carried to me even over the engine roar. I sped down the mountain, moonlight receding behind me. Wolves' echoes chased my tires. Only when I reached town did I breathe again. I returned the talisman to Mrs. Bellamy. "Take it," I stammered. "Keep it safe." She smiled sadly. "He still needs you." I left Silverpine that night, heading east on Highway 12, knowing I'd never outrun the howl in my blood, because when the blood moon rises again, I will hear Jonah calling, his half-wolf choir begging me to come home, and I will return. I used to scoff at campfire stories, until the night the whispering pines nearly claimed my life. My name is Lucas Vega, and I run an ecotourism outfit in northern Vermont. Every fall, I guide small groups into the woods for foliage tours, birdsong hikes, and the occasional pumpkin hunt. I know every trail, every beaver dam, every spruce that survives the winter. I know how to read the wind, how to predict a thunderstorm, and how to spot a bear before you startle it. But I never knew what it felt like to have the forest itself turn against you. It began in late September, during our busiest weeks. I had a group of 6 clients, professionals from Boston, looking for a digital detox. We set camp on the edge of Red Maple Lake, near a stand of ancient white pines. The water was glassy, reflecting copper leaves and early frost. Firewood stacked, lanterns ready. I led my group on a sunset paddle. We laughed, threw the oars in, and let the wind carry us back to shore. That first night, everything was normal. Stories by the fire, hot cider, a smattering of stars. I warned them about the quiet nights of Red Maple, the kind of silence that presses so deep your heartbeat echoes. They nodded, then drifted to their tents while I secured the site. I slipped into my own tent around midnight. At 2:03 a.m., I awoke to a faint rustling, pines swaying, needles brushing. I unzipped the door, flashlight in hand, prepared to shoo away a raccoon, but the air was dry and still. No breeze, no critter, just the distant croak of an owl, and then a whisper, soft, almost polite. It rose from the darkest grove of pines, 3 syllables, repeated low and melodic, like someone calling from across the water. "Lucas, Lucas. My pulse spiked. I shook my head, convinced it was my tired mind. I zipped up and tried to sleep again. An hour later, I heard it again. Lucas, louder, coming across the campfire stones, between tents. My skin crawled. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out, and swept the beam across the pines. Shadows flickered, but nothing moved. I called into the night, voice hoarse, "Who's there?" No answer, only a soft exhale of wind in the needles. I checked each tent. My group was breathing evenly, unaware. I escorted them back to sleep. I stayed awake in my chair by the fire until dawn. Morning brought sunshine, coffee, and laughter. My clients boasted of spotting a porcupine and hummingbird. I forced a smile, hiding my exhaustion. That evening, under a full golden moon, we hiked a hillside trail draped in scarlet birch and oak. Lanterns bobbed, leaves crunched under boots. We reached a rocky overlook, and I pointed out mountain peaks. They applauded the view, snapped photos, then asked me to share more local lore. I told them about silver mining days and how the pines sometimes sang in the wind. They smiled politely. When we descended, I dropped the lantern's brightness, leaving only moonlight. That's when I saw it, on the trail behind us, tall, slender, backlit by moon, fur the color of ash. At first, I thought it was someone's costume, maybe a prank. But the thing stood on its hind legs, its forearms tucked, like a man folding his hands, its head tilted in a curious stoop. My breath stumbled. I smacked the side of my head. The thing did not vanish. Instead, two silver eyes caught the lantern's glow. Brilliant, unblinking. I shouted, "Everyone, back up." They froze. The creature took a slow, deliberate step into the circle of light. Pointed ears, wolfish muzzle, and arms that ended in human-like hands tipped with claws. Its fur rippled in the moon breeze, revealing rippled muscles beneath. I fired a flare into the sky. The blast of light revealed three more behind it, standing among the pines, motionless, watching. The lead beast snarled, a sound that merged man's growl and wolf's howl in a single tremor. Then, in perfect silence, they melted into the trees. My clients scattered in panic. I organized a head count. 6 of them accounted for, but my heart pounded. One deer stand had been overturned, harness tangled in branches. We hustled back to camp, barricading the area with lanterns and rope. I ran my flashlight over every shadow, every tree. We saw nothing more that night except the moon tracking across the sky. Still, unbroken dot by dawn, the deer stand was gone entirely. No debris, no tracks, just a hollow where laughter and lanterns had sat. I cut the trip short. I told my group we had to evacuate for their safety. They obeyed, eyes wide, faces pale. I led them to my truck, but as we drove away, I glanced back at the pines and saw a single figure at the tree line, arms raised in a mock salute. I sold my ecotourism business the next week. I returned to cybersecurity in Boise, but some weeks ago, I took a hiking trip in Colorado, just me and the aspens. At dusk, I heard it again, a gentle rustling in the pines, and a whisper, "Lucas." I froze. There was no wind, no fellow hiker, just the same soft call, beckoning me back into the deep woods. Now, I sleep with the curtains drawn, lights on high, phone at my side, just in case the whisper ever reaches me again, because I know the shadow. Wolves still roam under the full hunter's moon, and they always remember the name of the one who fled. They say you never forget the weight of empty air. I learned that when I saw the swing still moving in Elder Hollow, without a soul to push it. My name is Aiden Clark, and I've spent my life running youth outreach for the county. I take a risk, kids camping, teach them to fish, ride horses, find confidence under open skies. When I planned our October weekend retreat at Elder Hollow Campground, I expected scrapes and campfire skits, not blood-drenched legends come to life. Elder Hollow sits where two creeks converge under ancient maples, a place of mist and memories. Locals avoid it in October. They say long ago, two children vanished from that very swing set under a red moon, never to be found. The townspeople whispered of wolf shadows and half-heard laughter in the pines. I chalked it up to spooky folklore and booked the cabins anyway. Our group was 5 teens and me. We arrived Friday afternoon, hauled gear to cabin 3, and set up. The swing set, ribboned with rust and spiderwebs, stood by an old stone well. I joked, "Who's up for a race to swing under the moon?" They laughed. We split firewood, cooked hot dogs, then gathered around the embers to talk. I told them the Elder Hollow story. 2 kids, a swing, a scarlet moon. Their eyes lit up with adrenaline, begging for truth. I promised a moonlit visit at 10:47 p.m. The hunter's moon crept above the trees, pocking the ground with red light. Lanterns bobbed as we strode down the path. The woods were quiet, too quiet. No crickets, no owls, only the crunch of our boots. We reached the swing set. The 2 swings hung still, or so I thought, until one moved. Slowly, a foot-sized groove appeared in the dirt beneath it, then 2, as if someone just hopped off. But the seat hadn't slowed. It kept swinging in that scarlet glow. "Cool breeze," I said, but my voice shook. Before anyone could respond, a low growl sliced the air. 2 shapes emerged behind the swing, tall, bent figures stepping on digitigrade legs, arms too long for a human, muzzles parted in snarls. Their eyes were silver discs reflecting the moonlight. The teens froze. I swallowed, my heart pounding. Back to the cabins. Now, I barked. We bolted. I led them through winding trails, branches whipping our faces. Behind us, the wolves hurled their howls, 6 voices blending man's despair and wolf's hunger. I glanced over my shoulder. One beast leaped onto the swing frame, claws raking steel, then vanished with a single bound into the darkness. By the time we reached cabin 3, the power had flickered out. Inside, we huddled under blankets, windows, and doors locked. The lantern light cast jittering shadows across the walls. The howling came again, circling the camp, sometimes close enough to hear heavy breathing. One of the teens, Sarah, trembled. "They want us," she whispered. The boys tried to laugh it off. I patted their shoulders, fighting panic. "They'll go away at dawn," I promised, though I didn't believe it. I stayed awake, shotgun across my lap, eyes on the window. At 2:02 a.m., I heard scratching, claws on wood. Not the door, but the roof, the decking above us. My blood froze. A loud thunk on the roof. Then, another. The cabin groaned under the weight of something large. I swung the lamp upward, nothing but warped shingles. I slammed the shutters. Below, a soft thud on the porch. Then a whisper, Sarah's voice, or something like it. "Aiden." I raced to the window, yanked open the curtain, and saw her. The specter of a little girl, pale as moonlight, standing among the trees beyond the porch. Light. Her dress was tattered, hair matted, face smudged with tears. She raised a hand and pointed toward the swing. My throat constricted. "Get down," I shouted to the teens, grabbing Sarah's arm. We bolted to the screened front door. I heard the children's faint laughter, high and broken, echo through the cabin as we slammed outside into the cold. A dozen wolves circled the cabin now, eyes dancing silver. They closed in silently. I fired into the darkness, 2 shots. One wolf yelped and slumped, but the howling only grew louder, more triumphant. Another emerged from the trees, the swing rider, her face twisted into that same half-wolf grin, silver eyes gleaming with cruel joy. I aimed at her, but my hands shook. She let out a keening laugh, part child's cry, part animals howl, and vanished into the brush. The wolves retreated, slipping back into the woods like smoke. I gathered the teens and led them to my truck, heart pounding. The engine roared to life, and we sped down the muddy road, chasing the promise of dawn. Behind us, I heard the final howl, singular, mournful, of the girl and her pack, claiming their lost playground. We didn't stop until we reached Highway 12. I pulled over, hands shaking, and we huddled inside until the sky pinkened. When the sun rose, the forest fell silent once more, as if the night had never happened. I never took another camping trip. The teens returned to the city, the swing set scar left in my mind. I sold my cabin and now work in urban outreach, far from hungry woods. But sometimes, when the hunter's moon climbs high, I still hear the swing creak, the children's laughter, and the whispering pines calling me back to Elder Hollow, where the lost never truly leave. And I still wake 2 letters carved on my bedroom window: sweeten your blood, because legends die hard, and some truths chase you home. I always thought my cell phone's unknown number warning was annoying, until one came in at precisely midnight on the day before the hunter's moon. My name is Elena Ramirez, and I work in cybersecurity, tracking threats around the clock. I live alone in a suburban house outside Boise, where my commute is longer than most people's vacations. I'm used to odd hours, odd calls, odd people, but that night was different. It was October 19th, 2 days before the full hunter's moon eclipse. I was zoning out over lines of code when my phone buzzed with an incoming call, labeled unknown. I ignored it. Spam, wrong number, whatever. But it called again at 12 a.m. sharp. 3rd time's a charm, right? I answered. Silence. Then, a low exhale. Slow, deliberate. I said, wrong number. A click, then a whisper. I see you. My skin crawled. I snapped the call off. I checked my locks, peered out the window. Streetlights flickered in the gathering storm. No one was there. That was the first night. On the second night, at 11:58 p.m., my phone lit up with another unknown. This time, I answered on speaker. Heavy breathing, like claws scraping fabric, filled the line. Then a voice rasped, under the light. I raced to the front window. The streetlight nearest my door had blown out. Darkness swirled under the oak tree. I saw 2 glowing dots of amber, low to the ground. I backed away as a growl rumbled through the glass. That night, I slept with all the lights on, indoors and out. On the night of the hunter's moon itself. The call came at exactly 11:11 p.m. I stared at the screen, unknown. My hands shook as I swiped to answer, breathing. Closer, I heard branches crack on the porch. My dog, Max, growled low. The caller spoke, unlocked the door. I pressed my back against the kitchen island. Who is this? Silence. Then a single click. The line went dead, and so did every light in the house. Pitch black. My pulse thundered as Max dragged me toward the back door. I fumbled with the lock and threw it open. White moonlight poured in. Outside, 6 silhouettes stood motionless at the edge of the yard. Tall, bent, fur, matted figures, eyes like lanterns. They stepped forward in perfect unison, hoof-like feet sinking in soft earth, claws skimming the deck boards. One raised a hand and tapped at the storm door. Tap, tap, tap. Max snarled and lunged. I screamed. The beasts froze, staring at Max, then at me. The lead figure lifted its head and howled, a broken echo of wolf and man twisted together. The sound shattered the midnight stillness. Then they scattered, slipping away into the woods in a swirl of shadow. The moon broke from behind clouds, illuminating their retreating forms. 6 upright wolves, each wearing a human expression. I collapsed. On the doorstep, arms around Max, tears stinging my eyes. My phone lay dead in my hand, its screen cracked, etched with a single word, in crimson. Soon. I sold the house the next morning and moved downtown. My manager said it was stress. My friends called me paranoid. But I know what I saw and heard. Now. Every full moon, I sleep with earplugs, draw the curtains, and lock every door. And sometimes, at precisely midnight, I feel claws on my window pane, and I hear my phone buzz once more with unknown caller. Because legends don't stay buried. They phone home. I never believed in hauntings until something knocked in my walls at midnight and left paw prints on my ceiling. My name's Grace Hollander. I'm an architect by trade, specializing in restoring historic homes. Last spring, I took on the Adeline Manor in rural Vermont, a crumbling Victorian with peeling wallpaper, a turret with broken glass, and a reputation for odd occurrences. I saw only potential: carved oak banisters, stained glass windows, a grand ballroom begging for gala events. I didn't see a ghost story. I saw a blueprint. My crew and I moved in mid-May. Daytime, we tore out rotten beams and reinforced foundations. Nighttime, I slept in the turret room, waking to the creak of settling wood. The first oddity was the scratches on the dining room walls, long, jagged, too high for any child's prank. The house felt alive. Sighing drafts, distant footsteps overhead, furniture that shifted slightly when I blinked. I chalked it up to old house quirks, until the night of June's full strawberry moon, at 10:17 p.m., I sat in the library, poring over blueprints. A single lamp warmed the shelves. A storm rumbled outside. Then, 3 thumps in the walls. Tap, 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 tap. Not on the floor or ceiling. Inside the plaster, like something behind it. I paused, heart racing. "Hello?" I called, voice echoing. Silence. I stood, flashlight in hand, and pressed my ear to the wall. The thumping resumed faster. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded deliberate, like someone tapping Morse code. I backed away and grabbed my phone. No signal. I texted my foreman, only to have the message vanish. I sighed, old wiring, and flipped a switch to flood the hallway with light. The knock stopped. The house was silent again, as though nothing had happened. That night, I slept fitfully in the turret. Rain pattered the window panes. I dreamed of yellow eyes, reflecting candlelight, and woke to find the attic door ajar, though I'd locked it. My heart pounded as I climbed the narrow stairs. The attic was empty except for dust and broken trunks. But on the floor, next to the rafters, were clear paw prints in the dust, for heel to toe, and a single rounded imprint where a heel would be. Human-sized, yet animal. I snapped photos, grabbed the prints, but when I returned to the library to show the crew, they vanished from my phone and the floor was spotless. We laughed it off, settling dust, my imagination. Then came July's last full moon, the buck moon. I worked late pressing plaster in the ballroom when a chorus of howls erupted outside, 6 voices, long and wailing. I paused, plastered trowel in hand. The howl faded, only to be replaced by a low scratching above the ornate ceiling medallion. I climbed an old ladder into the ceiling crawl space, one of the last undisturbed spots. Up there, I saw bone, small fragments, bleached, like animal remains. I heard panting behind me and froze. A pair of glowing amber eyes peered out from the darkness of the joists. I gasped, and the creature, if it was one, disappeared deeper into the rafters. I fled down, almost tumbling. That morning, I found thick, dark fur tangled in the attic beams, and a note scrawled across the plaster wall in old charcoal. The walls hear you. My crew quit on the spot. They'd had enough haunted house experience. I was left alone with the manor, my own phone dead. No help for weeks, as I finished the project solo. The final straw was the night of August's first full sturgeon moon. At exactly 11:11 p.m., I was in the master bedroom, refinishing hardwood floors. I heard it, a slow, heavy breath from inside the wall. Then a voice, low and guttural. "Grace." I froze. No friend would know my name in this empty house. The wall bulged. Something pounded from within, then a claw gouged through the plaster. Near my head, splinters spraying. I slammed my fist into the wall, plaster crumbling, then staggered back as a massive paw print formed in the dust on the ceiling above me. I grabbed my keys and sprinted through the manor in the dark, rain blasting through broken windows. As I slammed out the front door, I saw it, a hulking figure on the porch roof. Digitograde legs, fur matted with plaster dust, muzzle lifted in a howl that sounded like a cracked human scream. Silver eyes locked on mine. I drove away, tires skidding, in mud, until the manor was a lonely silhouette against the storm. I put it on the market the next day, as is, historic fixer-upper. I never advertised the strange scratches, the vanished prints, the howl in the walls. Now I live in a city condo with concrete walls and no attic. But sometimes, when the moon is high and the wind is just right, I imagine I hear tapping, soft as fingertips, echoing through my drywall. I imagine the smell of damp plaster, of fur, and the weight of empty air pressing in, because I left a part of me in those walls. My disbelief, my defiance, and something took it as a challenge, and I know, one day, I'll hear it again. Grace. I always thought the dead stayed in their graves, until I heard their howls echoing through Haggard Hills Cemetery. My name is Victoria Tori Kincaid, and I'm a folklore researcher. I travel to forgotten towns, gathering tales of hauntings, cryptids, and curses. I've published articles, recorded interviews, and even filmed a documentary or two, but nothing prepared me for what I encountered in the tiny Pennsylvania borough of Dunraven. Dunraven's claim to fame was Haggard Hill, a 19th century cemetery perched atop a rocky rise overlooking the Susquehanna River. Locals swore that every full moon, the graves rattled and the dead howled for vengeance. When I arrived under the October harvest moon, I dismissed it as atmospheric. Too good not to film, I set up camp in an abandoned sexton's shack near the old iron gates. My equipment, camera, audio recorders, EMF meters, and comfort items, coffee, notebooks, and a thermos of tea. The first night, I walked among the tombstones, reading names. Here lies Samuel Haggard, 1823, 1888, Mary Thompson, 1845, 1869. The wind whistled, nothing more. On the second night, under the hunter's moon, I positioned cameras at the hill's crest. The moon rose full, blood pale, over cracked headstones. At exactly 11:11 p.m., the first howl shattered the silence. Low layered with 1,000 echoes, it reverberated across the river valley. I stood frozen as more howls joined in. Men, women, children, each voice a fragment of rage and sorrow. My EMF meter spiked. I recorded every second. Then the ground trembled. Tombstones shifted, toppling in dominoes, until the hill was strewn with broken marble. I saw shapes emerging, 6 figures staggering from open graves, limbs stiff as wood, faces gaunt, eyes glowing, yellow. Each walked on 2 legs, bodies emaciated, yet towering, mouths gaping in wordless screams. I fumbled for my camcorder. The first ghoul reached a fence's rot, iron spikes, and tore its way through. as though the metal were wet clay. The second bent its head back and howled, a sound that cracked centuries-old stones. I backed away, heart raging, stumbling over roots. They crept toward me. 6 revenants of human form, but twisted by death's hunger. I turned and ran, camera swinging. The hill's path was narrow. I crashed through bushes, branches whipping my face. Behind me, the howls grew louder, closer. 6 voices joined by a low, bestial growl. I burst into the sexton's shack, slamming the door. The revenants battered the wood, claws splintering the frame. I grabbed my audio recorder, hoping for my life, and sprinted for my truck parked on the river road. They pursued me down the hill, claw-cracked earth churning under their feet. I jumped in, locked the door, and gunned the engine. As I sped away, I stole a glance in the rearview mirror, the now smashed cemetery entrance, and at the crest of Haggard Hill, 6 silhouettes standing among the broken stones. Glowing eyes trained on me until darkness swallowed them. I left, dawn raven at dawn, without looking back. I sold my footage to a network under lost tapes conditions. No names, no location. They ran it as entertainment. Ratings soared. I slept poorly as the credits rolled, the howls replaying in my nightmares. Now, when the full moon rises red over the city skyline, I feel the ground tremble beneath my feet, and sometimes, in my dreams, I hear their chorus, angry, aching, endless. Because in Haggard Hill, the dead claimed their revenge once a moon, and I will never be safe from their howl. I never understood the meaning of guardian until I found myself standing over fresh graves at Wolf Creek, watching the casket lids shake. My name is Aaron Meadows, and I'm an investigative journalist specializing in environmental conflicts. Last year, I came to Idaho's Panhandle to probe illegal logging near the headwaters of Wolf Creek. The company's heavy machinery had been ripping clear-cut swaths through ancient cedars, an ecological disaster, and local campaigners whispered that something in the forest was fighting back. I arrived in late November, frost necklace glinting on my jacket, camera and notepad heavy in my pack. I bunked with local activist Sarah Cooper, who guided me into the old guard station halfway up the logging road. We drove past stump fields and mud-slicked clearings until the narrow trail ended by a fast stretch of Wolf Creek. That afternoon, we filmed stream bank erosion, uprooted trees, water quality tests. The creek ran light brown. The forest was silent. No birds, no squirrels. We set up camp at dusk in a decommissioned fire lookout cabin, its windows full of shattered glass, walls tagged with decades-old graffiti. At midnight, I was editing footage on my laptop when I heard a placid whisper through the open doorway, "Leave." I spun around. The cabin was empty. Outside, the moonlight glinted on icy creek water. "Sarah," I called. No answer. Only the creek's rush. I shrugged it off. Wind, stress, and returned to editing. But at 2:07 a.m., I heard it again. A low grinding growl rising from beneath the floorboards. My pulse leaped. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. Between the cabin and the creek, fresh earth had been overturned. 2 shallow graves, each containing a silvered skull, 1 deer, 1 elk, capped with rough-hewn pine lids. Beside them, paw prints, 4 forward-facing toes, and a human-sized heel. The single toe claw on each heel was 6 inches long. A howl cracked overhead, a single, tortured note. I flicked my light up the slope to see a massive silhouette, perched on a fallen log, half wolf, half man. Muzzle lifted, eyes glowing like embers. Its fur was matted with mud and bone dust. Below its head, a necklace of antler fragments and cedar twigs hung like a trophy. I fumbled for my camera. When I raised it, the creature's head snapped toward me. It fixed me with a gaze that held. centuries of guardianship and grief. Then it vanished in a blur of fur and moonlight. The next morning, Sarah was missing. Her sling bag lay open on the lookout's porch, papers fluttering in the wind. No tracks from the cabin to the creek, except those 2 graves' prints. I radioed the forestry service. 3 rangers arrived within hours. They found the graves, now empty, but no Sarah. No sign of logging sabotage. No broken machinery. Just 2 mysterious graves and a void where the activists had been. The rangers chalked it up to environmental zeal gone wrong. Official reports blamed hypothermia, but no body was ever recovered. The logging resumed. The creek runs muddier than ever. Months later, I returned to Wolf Creek under the March full moon. I hiked in alone, camera in hand, toward the site of the graves. The moonlight painted the creek a steely silver. As I neared the cabin, I heard it, a single echoing howl. I froze. From the trees, the creature emerged, antler necklace clinking, eyes the color of dying embers. At its side stood Sarah, unchanged, pale, wearied, her eyes distant. The beast nudged her forward, body half turned toward me, as if granting permission. Sarah lifted her hand in a trembling wave, voice hollow. It saved me. The guardian howled again, louder this time, and melted back into the pines with Sarah at its side. She never spoke of what happened, only left the region and sued me for privacy invasion. "He's not a monster," she said once. "He's the guardian." I left Idaho that night, but I still hear the Wolf Creek howl in my dreams and feel buried eyes watching from the pines as I type. Because sometimes protection comes from places you least expect, and guardians aren't always human, and Wolf Creek still calls. I never thought a forest could bleed until I saw the sap run red dot. My name is Harper Halliday, and I'm a field botanist. I study tree health, bark diseases, invasive species, the kind of stuff that keeps most people reaching for aspirin. Last spring, I was called to investigate an outbreak of wilting birches in the northern Maine highlands. The locals whispered of witchcraft and wolf's curse, but I packed my press on the map data sheets and headed into the pines. By the time I reached Birch Hollow, the canopy was thinning under patchy die-off. White birches stood mottled in gray, leaves shriveling on the branches. I set up camp at the trailhead, then spent 2 days collecting samples and drilling core plugs. At night, I slept under a green tarp, lulled by the hush of needles in the wind. On my 3rd evening, as the hunter's moon slipped into view, I hiked deeper to check a remote grove. The trail narrowed until I was shoulder to shoulder with hardwoods, their trunks smooth and pale. I ran my hand along each bark for fungal cankers, but one tree sent a chill through my glove. Its bark wept. Sap oozed in thick rivulets, but it wasn't gold or amber. It was deep, dark red, like blood. I knelt, heart hammering, dipped a finger in the ooze. It smelled of iron and pine, as though the forest itself were bleeding. I snapped photos, bagged samples, and heard a bark crack behind me. I whirled my headlamp. Nothing. Only the moonlight glinting off birch trunks. I shrugged it off. Wind fractured limbs, then hurried back to camp. Blood sap samples sealing my canvas pack. That night, I dreamt the trees were alive, their branches writhing like arms, roots pulsing beneath the soil. I jerked awake to snapping outside the tent. In the glow of my lantern, I saw prints, fur-toed and spindly, like a wolf's, but each pad was a human-shaped heel. They marched in a neat line around my tent, ending at the nearby birch, whose sap I'd sampled. Morning brought no comfort, only bruised dawn light. My sap samples were empty vials, labels smeared. The blood had vanished. I questioned my eyes. On the 4th day, I heard them. Howls down by the creek at midnight, 6 voices merging in a raw symphony that split the dark. I grabbed my camera and flashlight, raced to the grove. Under the hunter's moon, the birches wept again. Sap ran red. 6 figures emerged, stepping from tree shadows, tall, hunched, limbs half man, half wolf. Faces a storm of bones and fur. They gathered around the bleeding birch, hands trembling as they pressed against the trunk, eyes closed. One raised, its muzzle to the moon, and howled, an ache of grief and rage. Their sap-dripping palms left red fingerprints on the bark. I fumbled with my camera. The flash revealed their true forms. 6 forest spirits, guardians trapped between man and beast, feeding on the birch's life to keep something older at bay. When I clicked the shutter, they snapped their heads toward me, eyes like polished garnets. I ran, heart pounding. Behind me, the howls turned savage. Branches tore at my coat. Snow slipping, I crashed through underbrush until I reached my truck. As I sped back down the logging road, headlights caught them at the edge of the grove. 6 silhouettes melting into the woods beneath the bleeding trees. I left Birch Hollow the next morning, sap vials in hand, but every lab I contacted reported empty samples. I never published my findings. Now, whenever the hunter's moon rises, I see red sap on trunks in my dreams. I hear distant howls in city streets, and I wonder if those forest spirits are still out there, feeding on birch blood to guard something, even darker beneath the roots. Something that waits for a moon's whisper to rise again, because in Birch Hollow, the trees bleed truth, and the wolves protect it with their own. My name is Travis Lowell. I grew up in the Adirondacks, where dense woods blanket the land like a patchwork quilt of pine and shadow. I've hiked more trails than I can count, and never once did I believe the old tales my grandfather used to tell, the ones about skinwalkers, forest witches, or worse. The Dogman. I always chalked those stories up to campfire fodder. But what happened to me last fall on a solo backpacking trip changed that forever. I wish I could unsee it. I wish I could unfeel it in my bones, but I can't. It's been clawed into me. I had taken a week off from work to decompress, and chose the northeastern edge of the park, off the main trails, in the kind of quiet only the deep woods offer. No cell reception, no people. Just the creak of trees and the rhythm of my own footsteps. I hiked in about 13 miles and set up camp near an abandoned fire lookout tower that hadn't seen visitors in decades. It was quiet, too quiet. The birds weren't chirping. The squirrels weren't skittering. I told myself it was just the early October chill that drove them off. That first night, I was lying in my sleeping bag when I heard a soft crunch outside the tent. I froze. It was heavy, bipedal, not a deer, and not a bear either. Whatever it was moved with intent. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. Crunch, crunch. Then silence. After a long while, I unzipped the tent and scanned the area with my flashlight. Nothing. But when I turned back, I saw it, just for a second, between 2 trees. Eyeshine yellow, high off the ground. Too high. I thought I imagined it. Told myself it was a raccoon on a branch or something. But the next morning, I found prints. Huge prints. Larger than my boot. Long toes, clawed. Not feline. Not canine either. Not exactly. I documented them, marked the GPS, and tried to rationalize it all. Maybe someone was messing with me. Maybe some guy with snowshoes carved to look like monster paws. But I couldn't shake the way those prints weren't leading anywhere, just pacing, circling. The second night was worse. Around 2 a.m., I woke up sweating. It was freezing outside, but I felt suffocated, like something heavy was sitting on my chest. Then came the breathing. It was just outside the nylon wall of my tent. Low guttural breaths, like a lion trying to stay quiet. I didn't dare move. I held my breath and lay perfectly still, hand wrapped around the handle of my knife. Then the tent shifted, like something had pressed a clawed hand against it. I could see the outline of fingers, long fingers. It stood there, silent, unmoving. Eventually it left. When I finally crawled out at dawn, I saw more prints, but this time there was something else. Tufts, of course, grayish fur stuck to the tree bark around my camp. I collected one. It smelled like wet earth and iron. I hiked out that day. I should have packed and gone home, but some part of me needed answers. So instead, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I decided to climb the old lookout tower at sunset, just to see if I could spot anything strange from above. I wish I hadn't. From up there, I had a clear view of the ridge and the treetops. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the woods darkened, and that's when I saw it. It was running. No, it was loping, like a wolf on two legs, towering, fast. It cleared a ravine in 2 strides. Covered in matted fur, its face was somewhere between human and hound. But the eyes, they glowed like coals, burning yellow through the gloom. It stopped, turned its head, and looked straight at me. Even from hundreds of yards away, I felt it, like it saw me, not just my outline. I climbed down that tower faster than I thought possible, and didn't stop running until my legs gave out 5 miles later. I never went back for my tent or my gear. I drove straight through the night, dirty, cold, shaking. I sent the first sample to a friend of mine who works in wildlife biology. She ran the DNA test 3 times. The results came back inconclusive. Closest match was Canis lupus, but only 70%. The rest, unknown mammalian. I've tried to move on, but even now, sometimes when I drive through the woods near home, I swear I see yellow eyes in the trees. And I know that thing remembers me too, because some nights, when the wind dies down and everything gets quiet, I hear breathing outside my bedroom window, low, heavy, waiting. My name is Darius Feldman, and before last summer, I never gave much thought to monsters. I teach middle school science in Montana, live a quiet life, and always considered cryptid stories to be fun nonsense, urban legends at best. That changed when I spent 2 nights alone at an off-grid cabin my uncle left me, near the border of Glacier National Park. He died in that cabin. They said it was a heart attack. The sheriff found him collapsed beside his woodpile, eyes open, mouth twisted. The odd part, there were deep scratches in the logs behind him, and paw prints that made no sense. Massive, canine, but spread like a human's gait. I inherited the place because no one else wanted it. My mom begged me not to go. My sisters said it had bad blood. I told them I just wanted to spend a weekend clearing it out, maybe fixing it up. Now I wish I had listened. The cabin sits about 5 miles off a gravel road, surrounded by dense trees that lean in too close, even during the day. When I arrived, the place looked exactly like I remembered from childhood visits. Peeling red paint, a crooked chimney, and that same old porch swing with the broken chain. Inside, everything smelled stale. I opened the windows, aired it out, and started unpacking. By late afternoon, I had a small fire going and was sorting through my uncle's old belongings. A rusted tackle box, dusty books on local wildlife, a hunting rifle. That first night, I slept lightly. The woods were noisy, branches creaked, something scratched against the side of the cabin. I tried to ignore it. I chalked it up to raccoons, but just before dawn, I heard something that did not belong. It was a howl, but not a coyote, not a wolf either. It started low, then rose into this growl that ended in something too close to a scream. It made my skin crawl. I sat up in bed, heart racing. It sounded close. I waited for sunrise and walked the perimeter of the cabin. That's when I saw the prints in the dirt beside the outhouse. Big ones. Deep. 5 toes, but wide, with long claw marks behind them. I measured one with a stick. It was almost 15 inches long. I should have left then. I should have packed up and gone home. But I told myself again and again, bears can rear up on 2 legs. Maybe it was a grizzly. Maybe I was letting the isolation get to me. That night, I loaded the rifle and kept it beside me. Sometime after midnight, I heard scratching. Not like before. This time it was slow, steady, like claws dragging across wood. I sat there in the dark, holding my breath. Then I heard breathing. It was outside the wall, just beside the window. Heavy, animalistic breathing. Something large. I grabbed the rifle and crept toward the window, heart hammering. And that's when I saw it. It was standing, just behind the tree line. Tall, towering, covered in thick, black fur. But its face wasn't right. It was like a wolf, but stretched, like it had too much muscle in the wrong places. It stood upright, shoulders hunched, arms too long, claws twitching at its sides. Its eyes caught the moonlight, amber and narrow, focused. Curious then, it stepped closer. I fired a shot through the window. The creature flinched, snarled, and vanished into the trees. I heard it crashing through the undergrowth. Then silence. I stayed awake until dawn. The next morning, I found the spot where it had stood. The grass was matted down. One tree had claw marks, deep grooves running from shoulder height to the roots. I packed it. I didn't care what I left behind. On the way back down the trail, I felt watched the entire time. Every crack of a twig made me jump. Every shadow twisted into something monstrous. I told the sheriff. He said animals wander that area. I told a park ranger. He laughed and said, I saw a bear, but I know what I saw. That was no bear, no wolf, no costume. Something lives in those woods. Something ancient. My uncle didn't die from a heart attack. Not if the look on his face was anything like mine when I saw that thing. I've never been back to that cabin. I sold the land for cheap and never asked who bought it. I just hope they never try spending the night. My name is Ezra Mendoza, and I used to think the stories about werewolves were just that, stories. My grandmother told them to us when we were kids, half in warning, half in jest. They walk like men but think like wolves, she would whisper in Spanish. Keep away from the pines when the moon is full. We laughed. We rolled our eyes. We never believed. But last winter, on a winding mountain road outside a town called Cold Pines, I found out she was right. I was traveling to visit my cousin, who had recently moved to a remote mountain town for a writing retreat. My car had broken down in Denver, so I took the only option left, a rickety long-haul bus that made the trip once every other week. It wasn't glamorous, but it was cheap and dependable, or so I thought. There were only 6 of us on board, including the driver. Everyone looked tired. A mother with a toddler who would not stop crying. A man in a red parka who smelled like wet fur. A teenage girl with headphones so big they swallowed half her face. And an older woman dressed in black who never said a word. I picked a window seat near the middle and dozed off somewhere past sunset. Around 9 p.m., the bus slowed down. I opened my eyes to see snow flurries floating against the headlights. We had reached a part of the road with thick trees pressing in from both sides. The driver muttered something about visibility and tapped the brakes as we hit a sharp bend. Then something large ran across the road. It was fast. I barely caught it. A flash of dark fur and something like a hunched back. It darted from one side of the road to the other, then vanished into the trees. The driver swore and slammed the brakes. We skidded. The toddler screamed. I braced myself against the seat. When we finally stopped, the driver stood up and said, "Probably just a deer." But his face told a different story. He looked pale, shaken, like he had seen something much worse. That was when the bus went dead. The lights cut out. The engine coughed, sputtered, and fell silent. "No cell service out here," he said grimly. "Just sit tight. I'll try the engine again in a bit." The heater stopped working. The windows fogged over. We all sat in that cramped, silent bus, surrounded by forest. Snow falling harder by the minute. That was when we heard the first sound. It started as a low growl, not close, not far, just out there. Around us, someone laughed nervously. Probably coyotes. Then we heard something hit the back of the bus, hard. A thump that shook the floor. Under our feet, the driver grabbed a flashlight and headed to the back door. "Stay here," he said. "Could be a branch." He stepped out into the snow. I watched him through the fogged glass as he walked around the rear of the bus, light bobbing. He vanished behind the corner, and then we heard him scream. It was not a startled shout. It was a blood-curdling scream that made everyone jump to their feet. The woman in black stood and calmly closed the bus door, then sat back down. That unsettled me more than anything else. We all peered out, trying to see what was happening. Suddenly, something slammed against the side of the bus, so hard it rocked the whole thing. The guy in the red parka shouted, "What the hell was that?" Before anyone could answer, the thing stepped into the headlights. It was taller than any man I had ever seen. Easily 7, maybe 8 feet. Covered in shaggy, dark gray fur, with long arms that nearly reached its knees. It walked upright, but hunched forward, like it barely fit into the shape it was in. Its head, it was the head of a wolf, but twisted with something human underneath. Eyes too intelligent, too focused. Its breath steamed in the air. The teenage girl started crying. The creature walked around the front of the bus, sniffing. Its claws scraped the glass. Then it locked eyes with me. I do not know how to describe that moment. My heart stopped. I could not breathe. It looked right through me, like it knew I saw it, like it wanted me to remember it. The man in the red parka lost it. He pulled open the emergency hatch on the roof and climbed out, muttering about taking his chances in the snow. None of us followed. I heard his footsteps on the roof, then silence, then the sound of something heavy dragging across metal, a wet crunch. Something fell past the window, leaving a smear of blood down the glass. We all screamed. The creature howled, a deep, furious sound that rattled my teeth. Then the headlights flickered and the engine coughed. The lights came back on. So did the heater. The woman in black stood again. "It is gone. For now," she said. "This place is old. Older than the town. Older than the mountains." We didn't move. None of us spoke. The engine growled back to life, and the bus, slowly, rolled forward. The driver was gone. So was the man in the red parka. But the woman sat back down like she had seen this before. We made it to Cold Pines around dawn. The police barely believed us. They found pieces of clothing near the road. Nothing else. No tracks. No blood. Just silence and snow. I never took that road again. I do not think any of us did. Sometimes I hear about people going missing near those woods. Sometimes hikers. Sometimes loggers. No one ever finds the bodies. But I remember that thing's eyes. I remember that howl. I will never forget. I never believed in monsters. At least, not the kind that people whisper about in late-night campfire stories. I was a practical guy, a 42-year-old divorcee, just trying to make ends meet, working the night shift at a rundown truck stop off Highway 2 in northern Montana. The kind of place where the coffee is always burnt, the lights flicker, and the regulars are truckers who barely speak unless it's about fuel prices or weather. My name is Mason Pierce, and I can tell you now, monsters are real. It started on a Wednesday night in February. Snow had started falling early that evening, turning the highway into a death trap of black ice and whiteout conditions. By 10 p.m., the only vehicles on the road were snowplows and long haulers trying to beat the next storm cell. I had the roadhouse mostly to myself, save for my coworker Donna in the kitchen and an old man nursing black coffee in a corner booth. The howling wind outside felt like it was trying to peel the roof off the place, and the neon sign buzzed erratically, like it was short-circuiting. Around 11:23 p.m., a semi pulled into the lot. Big black rig, no logos, no decals, just a long, gleaming monster of a truck that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in years. It idled for a second before the engine cut, then nothing. I waited behind the register, figuring the driver was stretching his legs or grabbing a nap, but 10 minutes passed, then 15. No one came in. That was when Donna stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands. "You see that truck out there?" she asked. I nodded. "Double quotes, no one got out," she said, glancing toward the glass doors. "You think someone broke down?" "I'll go check," I said, grabbing my flashlight and pulling on my coat. Outside, the cold hit me like a slap. The wind was sharp, and the snow crunched unnaturally beneath my boots, like it was frozen solid, brittle. I approached the rig. The cab windows were tinted too dark to see inside. I knocked on the driver's side door. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. I tried the door. It was unlocked. The inside of the cab was dark and smelled like iron and something wild, animalistic. I clicked on my flashlight. Empty. No driver. No bag. No signs of life. Just a tuft of coarse, black hair tangled around the headrest and deep claw marks gouged into the dashboard. I backed away fast and practically ran back into the diner. Donna looked at me like she knew something was wrong. "That truck's empty," I said. But something was in there. We called the county sheriff, but he was already snowed in 3 towns over. Told us to hunker down and wait until morning. But morning never came for everyone. At 1:17 a.m., the old man in the booth stood up and started pacing nervously. He kept glancing at the windows like he was expecting something. "What's wrong?" I asked him. He looked at me, eyes wide and scared. "You hear that?" he whispered. I listened. There was a low guttural sound outside, like something growling deep and steady. Then, a howl, a long drawn-out cry that made my blood run cold. Donna dropped the coffee pot. It shattered. The old man looked at us and said, "It's here." Before I could ask what he meant, the front door exploded inward. Glass flew, wood splintered, and it stepped inside. It was a massive thing, easily 8 feet tall, hunched but thick with muscle. Long black hair clung to its shoulders. Its face was a twisted mix of man and wolf, snout elongated, fangs dripping, eyes glowing, like fire behind a veil of snow. It looked straight at us. Donna screamed. The old man pulled a hunting knife from his coat and charged. "You son of a..." He didn't get far. The creature swatted him like a toy. He flew across the counter and landed hard, unmoving. I pulled Donna into the kitchen and slammed the door shut behind us. We scrambled for anything we could use. A butcher knife, a cast iron skillet. The creature prowled through the front of the diner. We heard it knocking things over. It sniffed, it growled, then it let out another howl, and from outside, we heard another one respond. There was more than one. I bolted the kitchen's back door and grabbed the emergency flare gun from under the sink. We waited, weapons in hand, barely breathing. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Then the back door creaked, slow, deliberate. Donna raised the skillet, trembling. I raised the flare gun. The door opened, but it was not the creature. It was the sheriff. He had snow caked to his beard, and a rifle in one hand. "What the hell happened here?" he asked. We couldn't speak, just pointed toward the front. But the creature was gone. The truck was gone. So was the old man's body. All that was left was blood, claw marks, broken glass. We tried to explain, but I could see it in the sheriff's face. He thought we were crazy. They cleaned up the diner, told the news it was a bear, told us to keep quiet. But I remember what I saw. I still work nights, just not in Montana. I carry a silver knife now, just in case, because monsters are real. My name is Trey Matheson, and I have driven cross-country for over 12 years. Trucking is a lonely life, sure, but it gives a man space to think, to breathe, and sometimes to run from things. I used to laugh at all those late-night callers on AM radio who would rant about monsters on back. I thought people who saw werewolves were just sleep-deprived or high on something. Then I picked up the drifter outside Flagstaff, Arizona. It was mid-October, a little after 3 a.m., when I saw him on the shoulder, thin, hunched over, wearing nothing but jeans and a dirty gray hoodie. No bag, no shoes. Just standing there like the cold desert wind did not even bother him. I usually do not stop for hitchhikers, especially not in the middle of the night. But something about the guy, maybe guilt, or maybe curiosity, made me pull over. "You headed east?" I asked out my window. He nodded slowly, his face in shadow. "Hop in." He climbed into the passenger side without a word. I noticed right away he had strange hands, fingers too long, nails like little claws. He kept his hood up, head tilted down, face barely visible even in the cab light. "You got a name, friend?" I asked, trying to be polite. He looked at me, with these yellow glinting eyes, and said Roth. That was it. No last name, no story. Just Roth. We drove in silence for hours. I kept sneaking glances at him. His breathing was slow, but I could hear it, deep and deliberate. His smell was off, like wet dog and rusted metal. I tried rolling down the window to clear my head. At sunrise, I offered him a protein bar. "I don't eat that," he muttered. "What? Do you eat?" I joked. He just smiled with teeth too sharp to be normal. Things that run. I told myself I was just tired, that maybe he was a junkie with bad dental hygiene. Around 7 a.m., we pulled into a small gas station just off the highway. Roth said he needed a bathroom, so I watched him slink into the building like a shadow. Something about the way he moved put my stomach in knots. Too smooth, too low to the ground. The cashier, a kid who could not have been more than 20, met me at the door. "You know that guy?" the kid asked. "Not really. Just gave him a ride." The kid's face went pale. "That man comes through here sometimes. He never buys anything. Just disappears. You should get rid of him. People say he's not right." I laughed it off. "You mean, like dangerous?" "No," the kid said. "Like not human." I went back to the truck, heart beating faster than it should have. Roth was already inside. He smiled when I climbed in, and said, "Nice place, quiet." We drove another hour before he spoke again. "You ever seen a skinless animal, Trey?" I nearly swerved off the road. "No. Why would I? It's interesting how meat looks without a face." That was it for me. I pulled over under the excuse that I needed to check my tires. He watched me with those glowing eyes the whole time. I walked around to his side and said, "This is your stop, Roth." He didn't argue, just stepped out and stretched, bones cracking like dry twigs. "Thanks for the ride," he said, licking his lips. He walked into the woods beside the road and disappeared. I stayed there for a good 10 minutes before pulling away, heart racing. I didn't get far, about 15 miles up the road, I saw a cop car and flashing lights. They were investigating a scene near a trailhead. Curious, I pulled over. What happened? I asked a ranger who was directing traffic. Hiker found a body, he said. Or what's left of one. Looked like it had been mauled by a bear, but there ain't been bears here in years. I peeked past the trees and saw the body bag. Just behind it, deep in the brush, I saw a trail of paw prints, huge, clawed, and distinctly not bare. That was the last time I picked up a hitchhiker. I don't even stop for roadkill anymore, because sometimes the thing asking for a ride isn't looking for a destination, it's looking for dinner. My name is Lucas Moreno, and I used to think werewolves were nothing but campfire stories. I was born and raised in upstate New York, and I worked as a park ranger in a place called Echo Hill for over 7 years. It is a small, underfunded state park, more forest than trail, and most of the time, I barely saw a soul out there. I liked that. I liked the quiet, the solitude. It felt like I had the entire forest to myself. Until last October. I remember the night like a scar burned into my memory. The park had already shut down for the season, but I was assigned one last week of patrol. Just routine stuff, checking for trespassers, cleaning out the ranger cabin, and making sure no hunters were sneaking in before deer season. My wife, Miriam, wanted me to skip the assignment. She said she had a bad feeling. It's just 5 days, I told her, giving her a kiss on the forehead. I'll be back before Halloween. The first 3 days were uneventful. The cabin was cold and drafty. The generator sputtered now and then, but I kept busy. I chopped wood, took inventory, and did long hikes around the outer perimeter. It felt like any other solo assignment, until the night of the full moon. It started with the howling, not coyotes. I know what coyotes sound like. This was deeper, more guttural, like it came from something enormous. I heard it around 2 a.m., sitting in the cabin with a worn paperback and a thermos of coffee. The first howl made me spill the drink. The second one made me reach for my shotgun. There was no wind that night. No rustling. Just the howl. Then silence. Then I heard footsteps. Massive, deliberate, padding through the brush outside. I turned off the lantern and crept toward the window, my hand trembling as I peeked through the glass. It stood just beyond the tree line, 7 feet tall, maybe more. Thick gray fur that looked matted and wet in the moonlight. Its limbs were too long, its back hunched like it was halfway between a man and a beast. But the eyes, God, the eyes, were human, or at least they used to. It was staring right at the cabin. I do not know how long I stood frozen at the window, but eventually it turned and walked off into the trees. Not ran, walked like it was not afraid of anything. I did not sleep that night. I sat with the shotgun across my lap, every nerve in my body begging me to leave. The next morning, I tried to radio out, but the signal was dead. I hiked 2 miles to the Southern Ranger post, but the place was empty, like it had not been used in years. Even though I knew someone had been stationed there the previous month, their logbook was gone, their gear gone, just a cold metal cot and dried blood on the wall. I ran back to the cabin, threw my things together, and hiked to the access road. My truck was gone. I know for a fact I parked it at the base of the trailhead, but the dirt was freshly disturbed. Tire tracks gone. Just gone. I made camp in the trees that night, shivering under a tarp, clutching my shotgun like a child with a teddy bear. That was the first night it came close. I heard it breathing, not just footsteps, breathing. Wet, hoarse, animal breathing just feet away from my tarp. I did not move. I did not blink. I just listened as it circled me slowly for hours, and then it whispered my name. I swear to you, on my marriage, on my mother's grave, it whispered. Luakas. I waited until sunrise to open my eyes. Nothing there. I finally made it out on the 5th day. Some hunters found me stumbling along the riverbank, covered in scratches, face pale as ash. I do not even remember hiking that far. They thought I had fallen and hit my head. Gave me water, called in a ranger unit. They towed my truck out of the woods. It had been dragged deep into a ravine, doors clawed through like tissue paper. The interior smelled like rot. I handed in my resignation the next day. I still have the dreams, though. Still see those eyes every time I close mine, and some nights, I wake up to the sound of my name being whispered outside our bedroom window, and Miriam doesn't hear a thing. My name is Seth Langley. I am 37 years old, and I live in Pennsylvania, on the edge of a nowhere town that you would only pass through if you were hopelessly lost or looking for something you should not find. I run a small concrete supply company, inherited from my father, and I do not usually talk about myself. But what happened to me and my cousin Rob last fall, it changed the way I see the world. Or maybe it just shattered the world I thought I knew. It began with a hunting trip. Rob and I had not seen each other much over the years. Life, distance, and work got in the way. He called me up last October and said he found a new spot, an old limestone quarry out in Susquehanna County, just a few hours' drive from where I live. Nobody goes out there anymore, he said. It's perfect, quiet, full of game. That should have been my first red flag. I had grown up hearing stories about hunters disappearing in that part of the state. My dad used to warn us never to go poking around the old quarries, especially the abandoned ones. Something about how the rock there was bad. He never explained it. But I was overdue for a break, and I missed Rob. So I packed up my truck, brought my rifle, and we headed into the woods. The quarry was a massive open pit surrounded by thick pine forest. Steep limestone walls dropped 50 feet into stagnant green water. Rob had found a dirt trail that looped around one side, and we set up camp on a small ridge above the quarry floor. There was a dead silence in that place, like the woods held their breath the moment we arrived. That first night, everything was normal. We grilled some meat, knocked back a few beers, and traded stories about our old man's screw-ups. Rob joked that we were too old to be pretending to play anymore. I remember laughing. I remember thinking how good it felt to just be out there, away from everything. Then the screams started, around 2:30 a.m. I woke up to what sounded like a woman screaming. It echoed through the quarry, bouncing off the rock walls like a twisted recording. Rob sat bolt upright in his sleeping bag, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, too stunned to speak. We stepped outside the tent, rifles in hand. The moon hung low, casting everything in a silvery light. Then we saw the figure standing on the far side of the quarry. At first glance, I thought it was just another hunter, tall, lean, facing the water. But it was not moving, not shifting weight, not adjusting a rifle or scratching its head, just standing. It turned its head slowly toward us. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Its eyes glowed, like reflective animal eyes, but the head was human, shaped. Long matted hair dangled from its skull, like wet moss. Its mouth stretched too far. The grin looked carved, and then it dropped to all fours, fast. Like a puppet cut from strings, Rob whispered, "We need to go." We backed into the tent, zipped it shut, and waited. I do not know how long we sat there, listening, but eventually, we heard scratching on the canvas. Gentle at first, then harder. Clawing dot, then silence. By morning, it was gone. We decided to leave. We packed everything in record time, and hiked toward the trailhead. That was when we found the deer. It had been shredded. Not just killed, ripped open, like someone had tried to peel it apart. There were bite marks on its rib cage. Human-shaped ones, but bigger, much bigger. We tried to radio out. Nothing but static. Rob wanted to push through the forest off trail, but I convinced him to head down toward the quarry path. It was faster. We could cut across the floor and hit the access road. That decision nearly got us killed as we crossed the quarry. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath, despite it being October. Rob stopped, crouched, and pointed. Something was moving along the far edge. Not walking, crawling. It was that thing, or something like it. Long limbs, joints bending the wrong way. It moved like it was broken, like it should not be alive, but it was coming toward us with terrifying speed. We ran. Rob tripped. I helped him up, but the thing was gaining. And then, from behind us, came another scream, but not human this time. It was deep, guttural, almost mechanical. The creature stopped. Then it turned and bolted straight back into the woods. We did not stop until we made it back to my truck. The rangers did not believe us. They thought we mistook a bear for something else, but that thing, it was not a bear. A few days later, Rob sent me a voicemail. He had been having dreams, nightmares, really. Something was following him, whispering, mimicking voices he knew. 2 weeks after that, Rob vanished. His car was found parked near another quarry, miles from where we had camped. Inside the car were claw marks on the inside of the windshield. They never found him. Sometimes, late at night, I play the voicemail he left me over and over. He sounds terrified. At the very end, you can hear something in the background, something growling, and it is saying my name. My name is Brian Fletcher, and for the first 34 years of my life, I never believed in monsters. I grew up on a modest apple orchard in Vermont that had been in our family for 3 generations. My parents were the hard-working, no-nonsense type. We didn't talk about ghosts or folklore. If something creaked in the woods, it was wind or wildlife. If an animal went missing, it was coyotes. That was the mindset I carried with me well into adulthood, until last October. It was supposed to be our best harvest in years. The trees were thick with fruit, our cold storage was full, and for the first time since my father passed away, I actually thought the farm might break even. I was running it now, me and my younger sister, Emily. She handled the business side. I handled the land. On October 12th, I got up before sunrise like I always did. The sky was still ink black when I walked out with my thermos of coffee, boots, crunching the frosted grass. I remember thinking the wind felt wrong. Not stronger, just off. It was dead still, but cold enough to bite through layers. The kind of chill that got into your teeth. That was the morning I found our dog, Huck. Or what was left of him. Huck was a shepherd, mix, big, loyal, and fearless. We let him roam the property at night. He was smart enough to scare off deer, but gentle with the local kids who came to pick apples. I found him just beyond the north fence line, lying in the dew. At first I thought he was asleep. Then I saw the blood. Deep gashes on his sides, neck torn open, one leg missing. What made my stomach turn wasn't just the gore. It was the way he looked, frozen in terror, like something had paralyzed him. In his final moments, there was no sign of a fight, no drag marks, just Huck, ripped open like a sack of feed. I buried him myself. Emily cried. I didn't. I told her it had to be a coyote, or maybe even a bobcat, anything I could say to avoid how I really felt. Because that night, I heard something. I was in the barn repairing a busted pulley system when I heard a howl. Now, I've lived on this land my entire life. I've heard every sound a Vermont forest can make. But this, it wasn't like any animal I'd ever heard. It wasn't the high-pitched yip of a coyote or the deep, echoing call of a wolf. It was low, guttural, painful, and long, like something was screaming from inside something else. It came from the orchard. I grabbed the shotgun. Emily begged me not to go, but I couldn't sit and do nothing. Something had killed Huck. Something was on our land. I had to face it. The moon was high and almost full, casting silver shadows across the trees. I walked between the rows, heart pounding, flashlight cutting through the mist, and that's when I saw them. Tracks. Huge ones. Bigger than a bear's. Long, toed, clawed, too symmetrical to be anything natural. Then the smell hit me, like wet fur and old copper. And then, movement. I whipped around, and I swear to God, 20 feet away, behind the Macintosh row, I saw something step out from the trees. It was hunched, tall, at least 7 feet, covered in patchy dark fur, but its arms were too long, its back bent wrong, and its face, Jesus. Its face looked like a wolf melted into a man. Snout, fangs, pointed ears, but those eyes, they were human. It stared at me, not like prey, like recognition. I raised the shotgun, but my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't steady the barrel. It didn't move. It just watched. And then it did something I still can't explain. It lowered itself onto all fours and let out a growl that sounded almost like words. I backed away, step by step, until I hit the fence. When I looked back, it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Emily tried to comfort me, said it was stress, grief over Huck, maybe even hallucination, but I knew better. Something was on our land, something that didn't belong. The next few nights were worse. We heard it pacing the edge of the orchard. We found more tracks. Once, I found a tree with claw marks 9 feet off the ground. Another time, we found a deer corpse, its neck twisted, untouched otherwise. Like it had been broken for sport. Emily wanted to leave. I told her no. This was our home, our parents' legacy. I wasn't going to be chased off by some monster in the woods. But then came the final night, October 18th, one night before the full moon. It started with the chickens. We had 6. By morning, only blood and feathers remained. No signs of forced entry in the coop. No prints. That night, I locked every door, every window. I sat in the kitchen with my shotgun, waiting at midnight. The wind started. Branches tapped. The windows, the house creaked. Then I heard something on the roof. I went to the window and looked up. A shadow moved past the chimney. Fast. Too fast. Then, crash. The back porch light exploded. The motion sensor flicked on and off, like something was walking back and forth beneath it. I aimed the shotgun at the door. Emily was crying upstairs. Then came the banging. Not a knock, not a scrape. Bang. Over and over, like something slamming against the back door with a shoulder. I screamed at it to leave. It didn't, so I fired through the wood. Silence. When I opened the door, the thing was gone. But there, in the dirt, were more prints. Deep, sunken, almost smoking in the cold air. Emily moved out the next morning. I tried to stay, but I couldn't. Not after what I saw in the mirror that night. Claw marks on my chest, and I didn't remember getting them. It's been almost a year now. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in the city. I avoid forests. I don't talk about the orchard, but every month, around the full moon, I wake up in cold sweat. My nails are longer. My breath smells of blood. And sometimes, when I stand in front of the mirror, my eyes look back at me, but they do not feel like mine. I did not grow up afraid of the dark. In fact, the woods behind my uncle's house in northern Michigan were the only place I felt calm as a kid. When the world at home spun too fast, parents yelling, city life screaming, I would spend entire summers in that cabin, wandering through the birch trees like they were old friends. That forest raised me better than most people ever did. So when Uncle Terry died and left me the property, I thought it was a blessing. I was 31, divorced, and mentally exhausted from running the marketing rat race in Detroit. The cabin felt like a return to something honest, something mine. I moved in mid-June. The place smelled like sawdust and old books, and every time the floor creaked under my feet, it felt like my uncle welcoming me back. I unpacked slow. No deadlines, no alarms, just trees, tools, and quiet. By July, I had started hiking again. My route was always the same. 2 miles into the dense tree line, a loop around a shallow stream, then back along a ridge where the sun broke through the canopy. It was meditative, until at WASN single quotes. The first strange thing was the quiet. Birds went missing. Bugs stopped buzzing. On a warm Saturday morning, the entire forest just fell mute. I stood there, surrounded by green, not even a breeze, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. Then I saw the scratches, deep ones, carved into the bark of a sugar maple, not from a bear. They were too high, almost symmetrical, 3 thin grooves running down like claws. I touched them, still fresh. That night, I heard howling. It wasn't far, maybe 50 yards from the back porch. At first, I told myself it was a coyote, maybe even a wolf. But deep down, I knew better. I've heard wolves. This was longer, sadder, like it wasn't just calling to others. It was warning. I went outside anyway, not with a flashlight. Just me, barefoot in the dark, staring into the trees. It felt like something was watching, right at the edge where my eyes couldn't focus. I remember whispering, "I know you're there." And I swear to God, I heard breathing. Not heavy, not animal-like, controlled, deliberate. By morning, I had talked myself down. Sleep deprivation, maybe a dream. But when I checked the trail, cam I'd strapped to a tree near the ridge, I found something that shattered every excuse. The camera was ripped from the tree, not broken, ripped, snapped in half like a plastic toy, 30 feet away in the dirt. The SD card was gone. Something with hands took it. I did not hike for a week. But fear is a weird thing. It fades. It convinces you that you imagined it. So, the following Saturday, I went back into the woods. That's when everything fell apart. About half a mile in, I noticed the smell, musky, wet fur, mixed with something rotten. I turned around. Standing on the ridge was a silhouette. I could not see details. Just its height? Massive. Its arms were too long. It didn't move like a man, but it didn't move like a bear either. It tilted its head, watching. I tried to walk slowly, calmly, the way you do when you spot a wild animal and do not want to spook it. But when I looked back, it was gone. I ran. The rest of the way home, I locked every door. I turned off all the lights, and as I sat on the floor with my back to the couch, I heard it again, that low howl. Closer then came the scratching, on the porch this time. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, I found footprints, not boots, not shoes, bare feet, only not quite 5 toes, but longer, clawed, human, but not. They started at the edge of the woods and ended right under my bedroom window. After that, I stopped going outside at night. I kept all the blinds shut, but it did not stop. Every 3 or 4 nights, I heard it, walking around the cabin, watching it. Never tried to get in. It did not need to. It was letting me know it could. On August 9th, I reached my breaking point. It was 2:14 a.m. I remember that exactly because the power cut out. Just the lights, not the clock on the oven. I got up to check the breakers. opened the back door, and froze. There it was, standing no more than 20 feet away, just past the porch. It was fully visible, under the moonlight. 7, maybe 8 feet tall, lean, but muscular, covered in dark, bristled hair. Its snout was long, canine, but its eyes, those were human, yellowed, intelligent, curious. It did not growl. It did not charge. It just stared. I could not move. My body was screaming, but my legs would not respond. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. Then, slowly, it backed away, on 2 legs, 1 step at a time, vanishing into the trees. I packed the next day, left the cabin, rented a place in town. But before I left, I walked into the woods one last time and nailed a sign to the trailhead. Private property. Do not enter. Not for hikers. For it, whatever it was, it let me go. But I think about it every day. Sometimes in dreams. Sometimes when I'm driving home and I think, I see movement in the trees. The forest has rules. I broke them, and I am still waiting to see what the price is. My brother and I were not close growing up, but there were certain things that always tied us together. Fishing was one of them. No matter how much life separated us, school, jobs, the usual adult stuff, we always made time once a year to meet at our dad's old cabin in West Virginia and fish the Monongahela River. It was the kind of tradition that seemed harmless, a weekend of silence, beer, and whatever we could catch, until the last time we went. Until the night we saw what lived in those woods. Ben had changed a bit since the last time I saw him, quieter, skinnier, like life had chewed on him a little more than usual. He did not bring it up, and I did not ask. We just loaded our gear, grabbed some beers, and took the boat out to our favorite spot near an old, half-collapsed dock upstream. The first 2 hours were uneventful, but as the sun dipped behind the trees and a reddish light washed over the river, Ben got quiet in a different way. He kept looking at the shoreline. "You ever hear anything weird out here?" he asked. I shrugged. "It's the woods, man. They talk." He nodded, but did not respond. We packed up a little early and headed back. That night, he barely touched his food. Said he felt like he was being watched. I figured he was just tired. The next morning, I woke up to find him gone. The boat was missing, too. I followed the path down to the river and saw it, beached awkwardly on a sandbar, about 50 feet from shore. Ben was standing on it, staring at the trees. I called out. He did not answer. When I finally waded through the freezing water to reach him, he was pale, drenched in sweat, his eyes, not right, wide, almost wild. "There was something in the trees," he whispered. "It walked like a man, but it wasn't." I scanned the woods. Nothing. A bear. No. Taller. It was hunched over, but it looked right at me. Yellow eyes. It didn't run off. It just watched. He refused to go back to the cabin. He insisted we stay in the boat for the rest of the day. I humored him, thinking it was a panic attack or something psychological. But that night I saw it too. It was just past midnight. We had tied the boat to a low-hanging branch near the riverbank. I could not sleep, so I sat upright, watching the stars and listening to the crickets. Then, all at once, the sound cut out. Gone. I held my breath, and that was when I heard it. Something walking just past the trees, slow, calculated, 2 legs. I nudged Ben awake. He did not move. He was paralyzed with fear, his eyes locked on the bank, and then I saw them eyes. Not glowing, not like in movies, just reflective, like how a cat's eyes catch the light, except they were 7 feet off the ground. I whispered, "Stay down." It stepped forward. The thing looked like a man at first, but it was not. Its limbs were too long, The way it moved, tense, twitchy, like its joints did not fit right. Hair matted along its chest and arms. Its face was the worst part, like a wolf's snout had been forced onto a man's head. But it wasn't angry. It was curious. It tilted its head, breathing deep, like it was tasting the air. Ben grabbed my arm so hard I thought he'd break it, and then, the thing smiled. I am not exaggerating. It pulled back its lips, just enough to show its teeth, long, canine, yellowed from age, like it wanted us to know, I see you. We stayed frozen, not daring to breathe. Eventually it backed away. It did not run. It did not growl. It just turned and vanished into the brush. We left the river at first light. I wanted to drive straight home, but Ben insisted we stop at an old bait shack along the highway. Said he needed to ask someone something. The owner was an older guy named Elroy, real backwoods type. When Ben described what we saw, Elroy just nodded once and said, "You boys met the thing that walks the banks." He told us about the stories, old ones, passed down for generations, about a creature that used to be a man, cursed for bloodshed, doomed to walk the woods in a body that was no longer his. Some people called it a werewolf. Others didn't bother giving it a name. He said, it usually kept to itself, but every now and then, it showed itself to those who carried some kind of sorrow. It smells pain, Elroy told us. Like a dog, only it ain't no dog. Ben did not say a word the entire ride home. I tried calling him a few times that month. No answer. A few weeks later, I found out he had checked into a facility downstate. Breakdown, that was the word they used. He had started waking up at night, growling in his sleep, had clawed his own arms raw. He is still there, sometimes. When I visit, he tells me things I try hard not to believe. That he feels it calling to him. That it did something to him. That it marked him. And the worst part is, I believe him, because sometimes, when I dream, I hear it too. The slow crunch of leaves, the soft breathing in the dark, and I know one day I will go back to that river, and it will be waiting. I never intended to go back to that town. Marble Creek, Kentucky, half forgotten on the map, full of old secrets. But here I was, renting the same creaky cabin I'd stormed out of 5 years ago, chasing a story the papers wouldn't touch. The Legend of the Red Moon Wolf. My name's Evelyn Eve Carter. I'm a freelance journalist, and back then, I'd been hot on a missing persons case. 2 hikers disappeared on the ridge during a blood-red lunar eclipse. Locals blamed the old mine bears, even cultists. I blamed coincidence, until night fell and the moon did turn red and something came howling down the hill. I fled then, swore I'd never return. Life moved on, new city, new scars. But when another pair vanished last month during that same eclipse, I couldn't ignore it. I needed answers. I arrived in Marble Creek on October 25th, a week before the lunar event. The air was already crisp, leaves hanging scarlet and gold. My first stop was Connie's Diner, the heart of local gossip. Connie herself was wary. "You come looking for the moon wolf," she said, passing me a steaming cup of coffee. "Best stay in town. Folks here don't like nosy folks near the hills at night." I nodded, studying her. She'd been a girl when the first hikers vanished. I paid and left, following back roads to the old cabin near Redwood Ridge, just outside the safe zone. The locals called it Deer's Hollow, but I suspected they meant something darker. That night, I set cameras around the property, GPS beacons in the trees. I listened to the wind in the chimney, felt the floors tremble with each gust. Then, at 2:17 a.m., I heard it. A low rolling growl, different from any bear or bobcat. The wind stilled, and a great shadow passed beneath my window, long-legged, hunched. I flicked on a desk lamp and saw claw marks gouged into the siding, fresh, deep. Over the next days, I interviewed old-timers, a retired sheriff who swore he'd tracked footprints taller than a man circling campsites, a woodsman who'd found half-wolf, half-human remains in the underbrush. Each added a piece to the puzzle, but the core was always the same. During the red moon, something transformed, hunted, and vanished by dawn. On the night of October 31st, I felt the change in my bones. The eclipse began at 10:45 p.m., the moon slipping behind Earth's shadow. I stationed myself on the ridge above the old mine entrance, camera rolling, rifle at my side, not to kill, but to see. The eclipse reached totality at 11:03, turning the moon an iron-rich red. That's when the howling began. First distant, mournful, then closer, rising in a chorus that rattled the trees. At 11:08, every creature of the forest fell silent. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw movement. A tall silhouette stepping into the clearing, its eyes glowing copper. It stood on two legs, head tilted as if listening, then slowly thrust its arms forward to reveal hands tipped with black claws, 2 inches long. My breath caught. It was massive, 8 feet tall at least, and its fur was matted, streaked with mud. And blood? There was something almost human in its posture. A man's frame twisted into a wolf's body. The air tasted of iron and fear. I pressed record. It snarled, low and guttural, and took a single step toward me. I struggled not to flinch. Then, impossibly, it let out a human grunt. Go away. My fingers trembled around the rifle's stock. I whispered, "Who are you?" The beast cocked its head, and I felt a strange sorrow pass between us, as if this creature remembered itself. And then, to my disbelief, it spoke again, voice rough. "Evelyn, my name." Time froze. My pulse thundered. It turned and bounded off into the shadows, disappearing in a blur of fur and moonlight. I never got another word. By dawn, the tracks were gone, the only evidence the claw gouges and my own frantic footage. When I reviewed it, the audio was garbled, just low growls and wind. I left Marble Creek that morning. I sent the tapes to a colleague to analyze. I don't know what I captured that night, monster, man, or cursed soul. But I know this: the forest has its own rules, and on the night of a red moon, those rules change. Sometimes, when I'm alone, in the city and the clouds pass over the moon, I swear I hear that same howling, reminding me I never truly escaped what lives in the dark. When I think back on that winter, I remember how quiet the world seemed, like the snow sucked every sound into itself, leaving only a brittle stillness that rattled your bones. My name is Marcus Delaney, and I'd moved to the tiny hamlet of Hollowbrook to escape the chaos of city life, the sirens, the crowds, the endless buzz. I'd bought a fixer-upper on the outskirts, hoping to restore the old farmhouse and find some measure of peace. Peace, as it turns out, was never on the menu. It began on January 7th, early in the evening. I was out checking the propane tank, just routine, flashlight in hand, jacket collar pulled high, when I heard it, the faint crack of ice. My property bordered a shallow brook that ran behind the house, usually frozen solid by this time of year. But the sound wasn't water. It was deliberate, like something large breaking through the ice beneath my feet. I swung the light toward the trees. Nothing, so I shrugged, figured a stray raccoon had slipped in, and went back inside. That night I lay awake listening to creaks in the floorboards, telling myself the pipes were settling. The next morning, the tracks appeared. 4 enormous paw prints, each the size of my hand, stamped in the new snow. They started at the tree line, lead down to the brook, curved around its edge, then headed back into the woods. But most chilling was the fifth print, footed, human-shaped. Midway between them, I stared at it for a long time, heart hammering. I'd seen wolves before, even a black bear, but nothing with prints like these. Nothing that walked on two legs, sometimes, for others. Over the following week, I set out trail cameras, salt licks, motion lights, anything to capture wildlife. But nothing triggered them. And every morning I'd find more tracks, more paw prints, the odd human step, even a deep scratch on my barn door, as though long claws tried to rip it open. A neighbor, old Mrs. Whitley, told me the stories behind Hollowbrook. How back in the 1800s, a lumberjack named Isaac Clark had lost his family to fever, gone mad, and lived alone in the woods, half wolf, half man, or so the legend went. They said he cursed the land before he died. Since then, every generation had whispers of something that came out on the coldest nights, eyes glowing, howling to the red moon. I'd laughed it off, until January 14th, that night. My power flickered off at 2:22 a.m. I cursed the storms in. My headlight, bright brain, stumbled to the fuse box, hand fumbling. Then, silence. Even the wind stopped. Something pressed close against the house. I froze, chest tightening. A slow, deep growl rumbled through the siding. Not a bear's roar. It was lower, older, filled with awareness. I grabbed my rifle and slipped outside, storm lantern held high. Moonlight carved long shadows across the snow. The brook gurgled faintly. Then I saw him, tall, hunched, broad shoulders, draped in fur. His legs were like tree trunks, bending wrong at the knee. His face, God, was a wolf's and a man's in one, muzzle elongated, lips curled to show teeth, too large. Yellowed. He met my lantern glint with a stare that felt like a pit opening beneath me. The growl turned into a low laugh, shameful and human. Then, impossibly, he took half a step forward, and the air snapped cold. He recoiled and vanished into the pines. I didn't sleep until dawn. When morning broke, I found one mark on my front porch. A single human footprint, 6 inches longer than mine, sunken and claw-streaked, right beside the deadbolt. By January 20th, I knew I was not going to win. I packed my most precious things, photos of Mom, Dad's old pocket watch, and left. As I drove away, headlights bunkering the trees, I caught movement in the rear view, 2 red-orange pinpoints reflecting off the passing pines. Just beyond the road's shoulder. I haven't returned. The farmhouse sits empty, only the wind stirring inside. I sold it at a loss and moved to a small apartment in Detroit. My friends and family say I'm safe. They say it was an overactive imagination, cabin fever, a trick of moonlight on snow. But sometimes, when the city is too loud and the winter wind rattles my window, I swear I hear a howl carried on the breeze. Low, guttural, and painfully familiar, and I feel a presence at the edge of my mind, a promise. One day, I'll come back, and he'll be waiting. I never believed a single word of the old township tales, until the night I saw my reflection change. My name is Thomas Tom Kessler, and I moved to Millhaven, Ohio, 2 years ago to escape the never-ending bustle of Cleveland. I bought a small farmhouse on Shoal Creek Road, a lonely stretch where row after row of cornfields met the edge of the forest. They told me the land was cheap because the old owners, an elderly couple, vanished in 1978, never to be seen again. The wind knocked them over. The realtor winked. I wrote it off as rural real estate humor. I settled in over the summer, fixing the roof, painting the porch, planting a vegetable garden. I took to walking the fields at dusk, enjoying the shimmer of moonlight on rippling stalks. The nights were Quiet, just frogs croaking and the far-off hum of traffic. For a while, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Then came October's full moon, Halloween's red moon, they called it in the county. I was alone that weekend. The new job in Columbus had me working late the Friday prior. Saturday evening, I took my dog, Scout, for our usual walk through the fields. The moon was a crimson disk, hanging low in the sky, flooding the corn with blood-tinted light. Scout stopped barking and trotted back to my heels, ears flat. Something felt wrong. Halfway down the third furrow, we heard it, a soft scrape of claws or nails against wood. I shone my flashlight toward the barn at the field's edge. The sliding door, which I'd locked that morning, was cracked open by a few inches. My heart flipped. Inside were old feed bags, overturned barrels, and an iron-bound chest that once held seeds. A breeze swirled around it all. Impossible, since the windows were sealed. I took a step forward and saw footprints. 7-inch long, 5-toed, human-shaped, the first 2 toes extra long, pressed into the dirt floor. I swallowed hard. Scout, stay, he whimpered. Ed, I backed out and bolted across the field toward the house, stumbling over the ground. That night, I slept, with every light on. Scout paced, ears trained on the windows. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to a knock, slow, deliberate, on my front door. Not the porch, the door. I grabbed my flashlight and revolver, crept to the entryway. The beam flickered over claw gouges in the wood, 6 inches apart, deep enough to splinter. "Who's there?" I called, voice trembling. Nothing but the wind, and something low in the forest, howling in an almost human wail. Deep sorrow met pure rage, and it echoed against the trees. Scout yowled, cowering at my feet. I didn't sleep again in the morning. Plaster flakes littered the foyer, white dust that hadn't been there before. I threw on my boots and followed Scout outside. The sky was gray. The moon vanished. At the field's edge, I found more tracks, the same massive human wolf prints, ringing the house in a crude circle, then disappearing into the woodline. I spent the next few days researching Millhaven's archives at the county library. I discovered the couple who'd vanished in 1978. Jacob and Iris Whitaker were known for odd behavior. They had an obsession with lunar cycles and occult rites. One entry mentioned they'd built a hidden room beneath their barn floor, sealed with iron bars. No one knew what they did there. After their disappearance, the town boarded it up and forgot. Armed with this, I returned to the barn. I pried loose a ledger brick near the back wall and found a trap door. Beneath was a ladder leading into a small, damp chamber. In its center lay a crude stone altar, stained dark with something ancient. Bronze bowls surrounding it held dried herbs and pages of scrawled Latin. On the wall, scratched into the plaster, was one line: Luna sanguis, Homo lupus, Latin for blood moon, man-wolf. A shiver ran down my spine. I turned to leave and heard breathing behind me. I shone my light. The chamber held 2 pairs of eyes, yellow, half human, half wolf. The creature crouched on the altar, its fur matted, muscles rippling, its chest heaving with a strange, sorrowful pant. It was Jacob Whitaker, sort of. His human face folded in agony, tangled into lupin features. It breathed out a word that cracked the silence. Help. My knees buckled. The beast rose, spindly limbs pushing it to 2 legs. It moved forward, not with attack, but with pleading. Every step dripped regret and pain. I felt its hunger for release. Then I remembered the revolver in my pocket. I raised it, tears stinging. It tilted its head, lips lifting in a wolfish grin. It howled, a sound that broke my heart. I closed my eyes and fired. The shot echoed, and the creature staggered, collapsing on the altar, eyes softening. A final, human-sounding whisper, "Thank you." I fled the barn as the first rays of sunrise pierced the trough. I didn't stop until I reached town. I told no one the truth, just said I'd cleaned up some old debris. They won't retell the library's records. Scout and I left Millhaven that morning. I sold the farmhouse and donated the barn ledger brick and the altar tools to the sheriff. Some say the curse ends when the beast is shot. Some say it only paused. Every month when the moon turns red, I check my bedroom window. Sometimes, in the glass, I see a reflection that isn't quite mine, a pair of yellow eyes, and a howl trapped in my throat. And I know I took on something ancient and never truly left it behind. I was never superstitious until the night the pines ran red with moonlight and blood. My name is Alicia Moreno, and I'm a wildlife biologist. I spent last summer tracking gray wolves in the Cascade foothills of Oregon, living out of a trailer and moving from one remote trailhead to the next. It was muddy, sweaty, exhausting, and I loved it. I believed in science, in data, in charts, not in legends of wolfmen or moon-cursed killers. One evening in late July, I was camped beside Brush Creek, calibrating a trail camera. I'd set to monitor elk activity. The full moon was just rising, tangerine tinged on the horizon. I remember how still the night was, the kind of silence that makes your skin tingle. I heard the creeks whisper, the buzz of cicadas, and then a distant scream. Not a human scream. Something deeper, more mournful, like a wounded animal crying out in pain. I grabbed my flashlight and slipped into my boots, determined to find an injured elk, maybe a bear caught in a trap. I followed the trail up a small rise, my headlamp sweeping across ferns. That's when I saw them, hoofprints, yes, but dragged, smeared, as if something larger had tripped on them. I crouched, heart pounding, and found claw marks beside each. Imprint, 4 deep gouges in the dirt. My pulse raced. Bears don't scratch like that, nor do cougars. Something else had been here. I pressed on, following that blood-tinged trail into the denser pines. The moon soared above, painting the forest floor in copper light. Then, a handprint. Human size, clawed fingertips splayed against the bark of a cedar. I stumbled back. My rational mind roared, "This is impossible." That's when it stepped into the beam, 7 feet tall, shoulders canted forward, fur matted with sap and dried blood. Its face was a grotesque hybrid, wolf's muzzle sliding into a man's jaw. Its eyes glowed amber. It wasn't snarling, it was staring, curiosity almost human in its tilt. My legs locked. The creature shifted on digitigrade legs, knees bent, the wrong way, and took a single step toward me. I felt its hot breath on my face, copper, rot, wildness. It opened its mouth, but instead of a roar, came a hollow whisper. "I'm sorry." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping, and fell against a fallen log. It cocked its head, as though startled by its own apology, then turned and melted into the trees. I could not move for what felt like hours. When I finally staggered back to camp, the trail camera lay shattered at my feet, its SD card torn out. Scout, my collie, huddled behind the trailer door, shaking. I left before dawn. Back in Portland, I tried to drown it in work, data analysis, grant proposals, but the image of those sorrowful eyes haunted me. I reached out to fellow biologists, citing predation anomalies, but they just exchanged worried looks. No one wanted to discuss claw-marked elk or human-sized prints. 2 nights ago, I got a message, a grainy photo of a blood-stained trail camera. Something huge looming in the background. The words, "It's back," scrawled on the image. No signature. Tomorrow, I drive back to Brush Creek. I'm bringing tranquilizer darts this time, and a camera I can't smash. If this is the same creature, perhaps I can prove it exists. map its range, understand its biology. Or maybe when the moon runs red again, I'll learn exactly what happens when a wolf becomes a man, and when a man turns into something else entirely. Because legends are born from truth, and I'm about to uncover the blood-dark secret of the pines. I never thought a mirror could betray you. My name is Daniel Reed, and I spent last winter living off-grid in the Yukon, tracking caribou migrations for a conservation project. I was alone in a canvas tent by day and a wood stove cabin by night, hidden from the world by miles of spruce and snow. Solitude was my choice and my refuge, until the night I saw something that wasn't my own reflection staring back. It was late January, a few nights before the Wolfpack collar data came due. I'd spent the day checking GPS collars on the ridge above Thistle Creek, wearing out my boots in the knee-deep drifts. By sundown, I was hungry, exhausted, and grateful to slide into the warmth of the cabin. I kicked off my snow-packed boots, set the kettle on the stove, and hung my parka over the back of a chair. The cabin had a single window and a small mirror above a dresser. I glanced at it as I prepared supper. Bearded face, tired eyes, just me. I went to eat, then worked on my laptop until the power lip glued me to the chair. Finally, at 11 p.m., I crawled into the tiny bedroom. The mirror's dull glass caught the moonlight as I passed. Around 2 a.m., shivers woke me. My breath fogged the thin glass in the window, and something in the room felt off. I rubbed my eyes and sat up. The cabin was silent except for the wind rasping outside. I stepped into the main room, heart thudding. The mirror caught my eye again. That's when I saw it, a shape moving behind me. My reflection shifted, gray-blue in moonlight, and the face staring back wasn't mine. It was longer, more angular, with high cheekbones and dark fur sprouting around its jaw. Its eyes glowed, faint amber, even in the glass. My gut clenched. I whipped around, nothing but empty floor. The cabin walls pressed in, too small for this terror. I turned back to the mirror. The figure was closer, shoulder and head stepping into view behind my own reflection. It was crouched, as if slipping out of the dark. I stumbled backward, crashing into the dresser. The mirror wobbled. Then, in one fluid motion, it stepped forward, in the glass, teeth bared in a crooked grin. My heart locked in panic. I reached out to shatter the glass, but my hand passed through it. The mirror was no barrier. My fingers slid into cold, bristled fur. I yanked back with a scream that wrenched my lungs. By the time I could think, the reflection was gone, replaced by my own pale face. Eyes wide, hair must... I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat by the stove until dawn, listening to nothing but my own ragged breathing. When light crept through the window, I ventured outside. Snow lay undisturbed around the cabin. No tracks, no sign of struggle, only the echo of my own terror. I packed my things and hiked down to the ranger station before sunrise. They told me I was sleep-deprived, overwrought. Mirrors can play tricks when you're alone too long, the head ranger said kindly. He offered coffee, got me a room in town. I shook my head. I knew what I saw. I left the Yukon the next morning. Back in Vancouver, I locked all the mirrors in my apartment behind boxes and tarps. I sleep with the lights on. If I shift in the glass, I flinch, because sometimes, when I pass a storefront window or catch a glimpse in a friend's mirror, I swear I see it. That half-wolf, half-man guy's grinning. Its amber eyes just behind mine. And I wonder if one day, when the moon is full and I'm alone again, it will step out of the glass and claim me fully as its own. always thought the worst predators were the ones you couldn't see. Turns out sometimes they're the ones that watch you under pale moonlight. My name is Marcus Choi, and for the better part of a decade, I worked as a backcountry paramedic in the Rockies. I'd seen all manner of broken bones, frostbite, bear maulings, even a kick from an elk, but never anything that felt out of nature. Until Hollow Valley. The rescue call came just after lunch on a Friday. 2 hikers missing since dawn, overdue by miles. Last GPS ping near an old Forest Service road in Hollow Valley. I grabbed my pack and a TV, met my partner Quinn at the ranger station, and we tore out along the snow-packed trail, sirens humming. Hollow Valley is ringed by pines, so dense sunlight barely reaches the forest floor. By the time Quinn and I parked, the air had acquired that uncanny quiet. No birds, no squirrels, just the whisper of wind. We set off on foot, calling the hikers' names, scanning for footprints beneath the fresh layer of snow. That's when I noticed the prints, a line of large, human-sized footfalls, each followed by 4 smaller, paw-like imprints. They led off trail toward a stand of pines. I glanced at Quinn. "You seeing this?" He nodded, face pale. "Nothing in the guidebooks." We followed. The footprints took us deeper, until the trees arched overhead like a cathedral. Then we heard them. Howls, low, echoing. 3 distinct voices calling across the valley. Not wolves. These carried human wails between the rises. "Call back," Quinn whispered. He drew a breath and shouted, "Hey, lost hikers, medic, respond." The howls answered him, closer now, circling. My pulse spiked as I realized we'd walked into something waiting. I grabbed Quinn's arm. "Let's back out." He shook his head. "Can't leave them out here." We pressed on, flashlights, cutting through the gloom. Then we saw the campers. 2 backpacks near a frozen stream, empty, no hikers, no bodies. Just the gear arranged neatly at water's edge. The snow around the packs was disturbed, as though something large had danced, in place, pivoting in different directions. A howl split the air behind us. We spun, guns drawn, hearts pounding. Between the trees, I caught movement, shadows twisting, tall shapes standing on hind legs, mouths opening in silent snarls. 5 of them, I counted. Huge, hunched, fur-matted beasts, limbs 2 long eyes, glinting. My throat closed. "Run," Quinn mouthed. We turned and sprinted back toward the ATV, stumbling through snow and roots. The creatures followed, matching our pace without breaking stride, their howls spiking into a cacophony. I felt Quinn go down beside me, ankle twisted. I reached for him, but one of the beasts lunged. I fired. The shot cracked winter air. The creature roared, a combination of man's scream and wolf's snarl, and fell, only to scramble up and vanish among trees. Panic fueled me. I dragged Quinn the last 50 feet to the ATV. We piled in, me firing in every direction as the beasts closed in. Then, as I gunned the throttle, something leaped onto the hood, massive paws, weight rattling the windshield. I skidded sideways, hitting a turn at full speed, and in the headlights I saw them break off in pursuit. Slipping back into the pine gloom, we didn't stop. We barreled back to the ranger station, Quinn moaning in the passenger seat. By the time I slammed the ATV into park, my hands were blue-white, fingers cramped. The hunters we sent out at dawn found no carcass, no injured beast, only deep craters in the snow and smeared paw prints that faded into untouched drifts. No tracks of the hikers either. It was as if both man and monster vanished the moment the sun rose. I took medical leave that day. They told me stress got to my partner. He recovered, but he never speaks of it. As for me, I've been trying to piece it together ever since. 6 silhouettes, hunting in a pack, human and wolf fused into one. Howls that sounded like sorrow and rage. Last night, I watched the moon rise crimson over my city apartment. I dreamt I heard them again, those lost hikers calling, their voices twisting into wolf cries, and I woke to paw prints on my balcony door, for small and one large, pressed into the frost. Now I know what's out there. Children of the wild, bound to neither man nor wolf, hunting under the red-tinted moon. And I know they have found a new territory, because I am still alive. I still remember how the streetlights died. My name is Harper Nguyen, and I was on my honeymoon when I first heard about Greyhaven. My husband, Lucas, and I had booked a week at a lakeside inn, a romantic getaway far from our busy lives in Seattle. We arrived just after dusk, golden leaves swirling around the parking lot. The inn's manager greeted us warmly, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the north woods as he handed over our keys. "Be back before nightfall on the trails," he warned. "Greyhaven's unsettled." I laughed it off. We unpacked, had a quiet dinner by the water, and talked about nothing but the future. Kids, new jobs, vacations. By 10, we were sated and dozing in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. I woke at 2 a.m. to silence. No crickets, no distant waves, just a drifting hush. I nudged Lucas. He mumbled something and rolled over. Then, without warning, the power cut out, plunging us into pitch black. I fumbled for my phone. No signal. I clicked its flashlight on and saw Lucas sitting upright, eyes wide. "That sound," he whispered. I listened. Far off, a low howl drifted across the lake, trailing into the woods on the opposite shore. It was long, sorrowful, and utterly human. Lucas and I exchanged a look. "We should go back inside," I said, though fear pinched my voice. We slipped on shoes and jackets, pushed open the patio door, and stepped into a nightmare. Outside, the inn's parking lot was empty. Chairs had been overturned, car doors left swinging. The lights along the shoreline walkway were dark, and not a soul stirred. A cold wind whipped through the trees. A distant howl echoed again, closer, broken with a crackling shout that sounded like someone calling for help. Lucas grabbed my hand. We crept to the lobby, where the front door hung ajar. Inside, the front desk was abandoned, keys scattered, guest register open to a blank page. The elevator light flickered. I called, "Hello." My voice sounded small. Then the howl rose, a chorus of at least 3 voices, right outside the windows. We peered through the glass, 6 figures moving along the edge of the tree line. Tall, gaunt, half-hunched, fur-matted into torn clothing. Their faces glinted pale in the flashlight beams we'd managed from the lobby. They stared at us, mouths opening to howl again. Lucas pulled me back. "We need to find the manager." We tore through the dark hallways, checking rooms. Every door was within arm's reach, but empty. Not a single guest remained. The inn felt like a ghost ship, every corridor echoing our frantic footsteps. On the second floor, we found the manager's office. He sat at his desk, alive but shaking, eyes wide, lips moving in silent prayer. His door was locked, so Lucas kicked it open. "Mr. Caldwell." He looked up, tears tracing white tracks on his cheeks. "They hunt the town," he croaked. "Only they remain on the nights of the red moon. Everyone else, they vanish." I felt my knees go weak. "What do you mean?" he swallowed, voice cracking. "Last week, the original owners of the inn, gone. The fisherman down by the pier, gone. The trail guide, gone. All vanished. Only footprints and claw marks in the dirt. No bodies. Then the howling, and by morning they're gone, too." Lucas and I exchanged a horrified glance. Behind us, a low, guttural snarl cut through the silence. The manager balked, scrambling to a file cabinet. He pulled out a map of Greyhaven, marked in red. 6 small cabins clustered near the woods. "They hide in them," he said. "When you see them, You run. We had no choice. I grabbed my wedding ring off the dresser. I didn't want to lose it. And Lucas found an old shotgun behind the desk. Together, the three of us dashed into the cold night. The 6 cabins huddled beneath towering pines, windows dark. Our flashlight beams landed on claw gouges and doors, shattered glass, tattered curtains fluttering. 3 cabins were empty. 2 had bodies unblooded, drained, skin drawn tight, eyes staring empty at nothing. And in the last cabin, 6 figures crouched around a fireplace. They looked up as we burst in. One rose, towering above us, matted fur, glinting red under its eyes. It tilted its head, throat bulging as it barked a savage laugh. Others followed, filling the cramped room with hungry forms. Their features twisted between man and wolf, the shape of limbs wrong, jaws too wide, teeth stained. Lucas fired the shotgun. The recoil nearly knocked him over. One beast staggered, then roared, sending splinters flying. The others lunged. I screamed, tipping a small table at them. The manager shoved past, dragging us out, slamming the door. We barreled back to the inn, stumbling through the black without care for paths. Behind us, cabin doors creaked open, 6 sets of yellow eyes stalking our retreat. The howls rose around us in a triumphant chorus. We slammed into the lobby and locked every bolt we could find. The manager manned the ancient landline, calling the nearest town for help. Dawn was still hours away. Lucas and I huddled by the window, cradling the shotgun, every shadow shifting with terrible intent. The howling slowed, then ceased. An unbearable silence followed, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. When the first gray light came, we crept outside. The beasts were gone. Only paw prints and footprints remained in the softened snow. They faded into the trees like ink in water. We found help at sunrise. Rangers arrived to clear the mass vanishing, the bodies, the claw-scarred cabins. The manager was questioned, then quietly committed to an asylum, his mind unmade by those nights. Lucas and I left with the first rescue helicopter. I never went back to Greyhaven. The inn stands empty now, boarded up, local legend gathering dust. But sometimes I still wake from that night, heart pounding, cold sweat stinging my eyes. I see those silhouettes under pines, hear the chorus of howls, and know the truth. Under a red-tinted moon, monsters walk on 2 legs, and no town is safe from their hunt. I don't carry a gun anymore, but I keep a mirror by my bed to remind myself what I am and what they are, because once you see the beast in human form, you can never unsee it. I never thought I'd thank a storm. My name is Josie Ramirez, and I've spent the last year on the road as an emergency veterinarian, bouncing between small towns where animal rescues are as common as hay barns. I never stayed anywhere more than a few weeks, until Coldwater, Idaho, where the sky stretches wide enough to swallow your doubts. I'd just finished a 10-hour drive when the storm hit, as if the clouds themselves had heard my exhaustion and decided I needed a baptism. I checked into the small motel on Main Street around dusk. The wind shredded the pines outside, and I thought I heard branches snapping even above the roar of rain. I dropped my bags and went out to my truck, only to find hoof-deep ruts in the gravel, 4 hoof-shaped dents followed by 2 long human-shaped prints, claws scored and pointing straight toward the woods. A chill ran up my spine. I'd seen deer, elk, even the occasional stray wolf, but nothing with footprints like these. I took a picture and texted it to my vet friend, Nate, joking that Coldwater was off the charts weird. He didn't reply. That night, the power flickered out. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, the thunder shaking the windows. Around midnight, I heard it, low, ragged breathing in the hallway, right outside my door. I pushed myself up, heart thumping, and tiptoed to the PEEPHOLE. Nothing. Then 3 slow knocks. Solid, deliberate. I swallowed. Who is it? I called. Don't know answer. Just heavy footsteps backing away. I checked out at first light, too rattled to stay. But the storm had flooded the roads. I was stuck. So I called the local clinic, offered to help with any stray animal emergencies. 2 hours later, I sat in the exam room under fluorescent lights, scrubbing in for surgery on a collared wolf hit by a car. As I worked, I noticed the wolf's collar tag, cold water pack. My blood ran cold. I spat the anesthesia drip and ran to the front desk. Pack, I demanded of the receptionist. You mean wolves? Like a wolf pack? She nodded, pale. The cold water pack. They roam the forest east of town. We track them carefully. They've never attacked anyone, until last week. She tapped a file. A young hiker had vanished on a full moon night. No sign of struggle. No blood. Just footprints, hoof and claw, leading in a circle around his campsite. Then, nothing. I swallowed hard, imagining the footprints outside my motel. I need to see those reports. Her eyes flicked toward the door. You sure? I nodded. Minutes later, I stood before the sheriff's bulletin board, studying maps and photos. Full moon dates highlighted, missing person names clustered like graves, and always those prints. An impossible 2-step gait, hoof followed by claw. That night, after my shift, I drove out to the old logging road. The storm had passed, leaving rivulets and muddy puddles. I parked, grabbed my flashlight and tranquilizer rifle, and followed the ruts into the trees. My boots sank in mud. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. The moon rose pale. As I reached a clearing, I found the campsite, a battered tent, a cold campfire, the hiker's backpack torn open. No blood, just ripped clothing and empty water bottles. I knelt, heart pounding, examined the mud. That same hoof claw pattern, hoof print, 5-toed gash, hoof gash, repeating in a wide circle. Then I heard them. First a low growl from the dark, then 3 more, echoing. I raised the rifle toward the tree line. 6 forms emerged under the lunar glow, stepping into the clearing in perfect unison. They were all 8 feet tall, faces half wolf, half man, muscular torsos draped in ragged fur, arms ending in wicked claws. Their eyes shimmered, copper, disdainful, ancient. They circled me, never breaking stride, their jaws parting in silent snarls. My breath caught. I remembered my training. Animals sense fear. I forced myself to steady my grip. Then one paused, head cocked, nostrils flaring. Suddenly, it threw back its head and howled. A keening chorus rose as the pack joined in, a multitonal wail that shook my bones. It wasn't just an animal call. It was a cry of pain and triumph. They closed in. The lead beast lurched forward, claws scraping on stone, and I squeezed the trigger. The dart flew, catching it high on the shoulder. It bellowed, stumbling back, but it did not fall. It shook its head, eyes wild, then leaped into the forest like a shadow. The others followed, without a word, vanishing between trunks until only the echoes remained. I collapsed against a tree, trembling, listening to the silence. When the radios crackled, I could barely speak. The sheriff's team arrived, bloodhounds, trackers, all following the hoof-claw trail. But hours later, they returned empty-handed. No bodies, only flattened grass and a reddened moon overhead. I left cold water the next day. The clinic quietly transferred the wolf surgery to another vet. No one pressed me about the storm or my early departure. Back in Seattle, I replay every moment in my mind. The hoof prints in the motel gravel, the raspy breath outside my door, the faces of that pack under the blood-tinted moon. Sometimes, I wake in the dark and think I hear their howls around my apartment building. I follow the sound to the window, nothing but city lights. but I know they're out there, bound by lunar curse and hunger, waiting for the next red moon to call them home. And every time the sky turns crimson, I feel them watching, and I wonder if one night they'll find me too. I never minded the dark until I saw something sitting in it. My name is Gabriella Gaby Monroe, and I've spent 5 years as a search and rescue pilot in the Rockies. Sunrise launches, midnight hoists, navigating blizzards and cliffs, with night vision goggles. Hell, I've ripped people from avalanche debris and helicopter-lifted hypothermic toddlers off snowbound slopes. Nothing fazed me until the call that led me to Jasper Ridge. It was a bitter November afternoon when the call came in. 2 hikers overdue. Last GPS ping near the old fire lookout. Easy rescue, I thought. Just a couple of city kids who underestimated the snow. I loaded my gear, fueled up the Black Hawk, and flew out into an endless expanse of white dot. By dusk, I'd spotted their camp. A battered 2-person tent half buried, no footprints outside, no tracks leading away. I hovered low, spotlight sweeping the tree line. Then I saw them, footprints. 4 huge hoof prints, each followed by 4 claw marks, and at the end, a single human footprint. They snaked away into the pines, into shadow. I radioed base, tracking. Footprints. Not bear, not cougar. Something else. Static. Then the voice. Bring M back, Monroe. I lowered the skids and grabbed my shovel and pack. The temperature read 10 degrees Fahrenheit. I followed the prints into the trees. Twilight bled away. The wind rose, and the pines began to creak like giant timbers in a storm. At a clearing, I found the first hiker, kneeling, head bowed. Snow-white hair fanning around a terrified face. His eyes flicked upward, and I saw them, the figures emerging on the ridge. 6 silhouettes, hunched, fur-clad, standing upright, like men wearing wolfskins. The pale moon glinted off their eyes. My training froze. They raised heads in unison, and howled, a human howl that carried on the wind and split the sky. My pilot's heart screamed, "Get out!" I pulled the hiker back and bolted. In seconds I was sprinting, my boots sinking in drifts. But the forest shifted. Trees rearranged themselves. I tripped and woke to find the second hiker standing above me, hands raised, clawed fingertips shimmering. Her eyes were filled with pain. "Help us," she rasped. "They're lost." A thunder of hooves shattered the moment. I rolled as one of the beasts barreled through the trees, horns scraping bark, an enormous werestag, its head a human skull fused with antlers, eyes wild. It reared, and I dove into a snowbank as its massive chest passed overhead. I scrambled up as another wolfman bounded toward me. I spun the hiker's headlamp on its face, pale fur, hollow cheeks, teeth bared in a sad grin. It hesitated, like it recognized me, then backed away. I called for the Black Hawk on the emergency radio. Static. Then a voice. "Monroe, we've got weather blow-in. Extractions, scrubbed." The wolves closed in, forming a circle, their howls rising in a funeral dirge. My breath fogged. I radioed again, voice shaking. No reply. I did the only thing I could, grabbed the second hiker's hand and ran. We plunged through tangled brush, clambered down a frozen ravine, and burst onto the ridge's service road. The trees grew thinner. The wind slammed us. Finally, in the distance, I heard it, the churning rotors of the Black Hawk. Defying the storm, I waved my coat until I was blue. The helicopter banked in, wind roaring. The pilot winced at the bloated foghorn howls echoing through the valley. She hovered. I kicked the hikers aboard, then climbed in last, shotgun clutched in white knuckles. As the door closed, I saw them, one last wolfman standing at the tree line, head cocked, eyes glowing. He raised a clawed hand in farewell. Then he slipped into the forest, swallowed by snow. Back at base, the hikers were debriefed. They had no memory beyond the clearing. Their hunt for help was a blank. I de-iced the chopper, my mind racing. The pilot asked about the footprints, deer, tracks, or bear. I shook my head. Nothing I've ever known. 2 nights later, I examined the GPS tracks on my tablet and realized something chilling. The flight path back to base had an extra weight, hovering briefly over an unmarked spot in Jasper Ridge. Beneath it, a pin labeled in my own handwriting, "Return here." I deleted it. Since then, I've left the Rockies. I fly Medivacs in the Midwest now. But every month, when the moon hangs blood bright over the plains, I swear I hear a distant howl. No animal I know. And I wonder if, somewhere out there, the pack still waits for its rescue. Because they aren't lost. They're just something else entirely.